Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's monthly compendium for the month of June 2022. Case file number 644, written by Ginger Cakes 19. I can't escape this light. I've had the exact same recurring nightmare since I was 3. I wake up in my bed because something is tapping on the window. We were on the second story, above the giant hill next to the Mount Airy water towers on Coleraine Avenue, so the 2 stories were more like 3. There were no trees or branches that could be tapping on it. That side of the house had no trees. I sat up in bed and looked over. My sister was already sitting up, staring straight at the window. I remember asking her what it was. She had no idea. We sat there whispering for a little bit, terrified, because whatever this was definitely trying to get our attention. I get up and go to the window. She tries to stop me, but gets up with me instead. As we were standing there, to the bottom right corner, it looked like something was there, but it was making itself invisible. You could almost see an outline of this thing, with like a little bean-shaped head, probably 3 feet tall. The tapping is still happening, and just as it felt like it was about to show itself, the brightest light I have ever seen began shining through the window behind us to the left, where my brothers were sleeping. They both sat up straight and started screaming. We started screaming. My dad and mom came running into the room and made us run to the bedroom across the hall. We ducked down next to the bed, all of us panting, trying to be quiet, but within 20 to 30 seconds, the light began shining through the window in that room too. We all started screaming and our dad made us run downstairs. We were running from room to room, hiding from this giant spotlight. When this light hit the room, there were no shadows anywhere the light touched. That's how bright this thing was. We eventually ended up in this giant room the house had that reminded me of an old ballroom. I'm not sure if that's what it was or not, but it was bigger than the giant living room and dining room together and had a tile floor. We kept that room completely empty. It gave off bad vibes. We hid in there for maybe less than 1 minute before my dad made the decision. We were going to make a run for it. It was no longer safe in the house. It had one door that led outside, and I remember being so scared because someone had broken the window on the door before, and there was broken glass on the patio. I asked about it. They said not to worry about it, but I was like, we are barefoot in pajamas in the middle of the night. What is even happening? My dad counted down from 3, opened the door, and we all silently made a run for it down the hill. I remember how it was chilly, yet slightly warm, probably spring, summertime. I remember the cold, wet grass on my feet as I ran. I was crying because I couldn't keep up, and every time I cried, my dad would pick me up. I began crying, and he stopped me, came down to my 3-year-old level, grabbed my shoulders, and whispered sternly, "Sam, I can't carry you. You're slowing me down. You have to be quiet or they'll find us." I was about to cry again. I'm like, who the hell are they? He picked me up one last time and I looked back at the house over his shoulder. It was a crystal clear night. You could see every star. But there was this huge storm cloud above the house and only above the house in a circular shape, with the spotlight coming from it, frantically searching from window to window trying to find us. He puts me down again and we run. The rest of my family is at the bottom of the hill already, but we catch up and he tells us to go into the woods on our right. There was a fitness trail that led to the apartments behind the house. I looked up when we got to the stairs. My dad tells us to split up. My oldest brother and sister ran to the left. My middle brother and my mom ran to the right. My dad and I went straight. We're trying to be as quiet as possible, but I was so scared that just trying to catch my breath would make them hear us. We're all there, standing in the middle of the woods, barefoot, in pajamas, hiding from some light, when it starts to come towards us. I remember closing my eyes and being like, "Please don't find us, please don't find us." But when I opened them, the light was already making its way to the woods where we were hiding. I was like, oh my god, they're gonna find us. So in my tiny brain, I was like, maybe it's better if they just find us anyway. I stepped away from the tree and screamed. My siblings from each side started yelling at me to shut up. My dad came over to grab me and the light started shining on us. My entire family ran over and my dad hugged us all as the light got brighter and everything went white. Then I woke up. Over and over for years until I was 18. Eventually the dream would change and the light would be replaced with whatever I was scared of at the time. A T-Rex from Jurassic Park, Beetlejuice as a snake. And if they looked through the window and saw you were caught. I remember a random day. We woke up and my brother and I had the same scar on our arm, exactly at the same spot, the same length and size too. We giggled because we both had a little patch of nothing on our arms that matched and had popped up overnight. We had no memory of where this came from. Got to look, every single one of us had it. Mom, dad, 2 girls, 2 boys, same spot, with no memory of how we got it. It caused all kinds of problems. I was terrified of running for years. In elementary school, we would have to run laps for gym class, and every single time we had to, I would just break down and start crying because I couldn't keep up. I was terrified of my gym teacher because he would laugh at me and be like, "Well, Sam is crying again. Go sit on the wall." That's where they threw people that didn't have gym shoes. So I eventually purposely began wearing the wrong shoes. I'd have panic attacks if he tried to make me run. Fast forward to about 25 years old. My dad, sister, and I are sitting at the table eating dinner at our family farm. We were talking about all the paranormal things that happened in that house. It was one of the major stops on the Underground Railroad. Everyone got murdered in the house for hiding slaves. When I brought up the dream I kept having, I started with, "I know it's just a dream, but the entire time we lived in that house, I had this recurring nightmare that I woke up in the middle of the night." My sister cut me off. "And something was tapping on the window?" I was like, "Whoa," as she continued. "Something was tapping on the window and woke us up, but it was like making itself invisible." We went back and forth, finishing each other's sentences. She mentioned Dad making us run outside in the middle of the night, and she even told me, "Chris and I went left. Mom and Nick went right, and you and Dad ran straight." We looked over at my dad and he was frozen. His face was white as a ghost. I remember if he remembered it too, and he slowly put his fork down and said, "Something like that." Every single one of us remembers it, and it made so much sense. My siblings started being really mean to me after that experience, straight up hateful, as they said it's because all I did was cry, but it's because I got us caught. I have other memories from after that. It was weird. We woke up in this place that looked like a hospital, all white floors and walls. Whoever we were with separated us from our parents and took us to this room with glass windows. They stood outside and just watched us in silence and didn't say a word. The room was filled with other kids. They were silent. All of them had bleach blonde hair and blue eyes, but no other facial hair, like no eyebrows or eyelashes. Everything just seemed off about them. After standing there in silence, watching these kids silently play with toys, it clicked. I was like, "Oh, they just want us to play with them." I ran over to a little girl and said, "Hi." My sister yelled at me and tried to stop me, but I was like, "Nah man, this is cool as hell. We got woken up to play with toys and other kids." Their toys were weird though. There was like a bouncy ball, a fire truck, other random kids' toys. But then there were other things I had never seen before. They were just like shapes with weird colors, but when you touched them, they made you feel a certain feeling. Like straight up voodoo magic. They made you feel an emotion. They weirded me out. Everyone else eventually kinda gave in and interacted with the kids, but they were so on edge and I didn't understand why because I was 3. They were using us to teach them how to act like children. They didn't understand laughter or why we did it. They couldn't laugh at all. All I remember is that they didn't understand how or why we would laugh or why playing made us laugh. I started reading a book I got off Amazon called The Threat. I went in just thinking it was bullcrap. It took me 6 months to even finish because it was just so boring and seemed too far out there. But there are sections in the book that brought me back like, it mentioned people being in rooms with kids, playing with toys. It mentioned the weird ones that you touched and made you feel, well, anything. It mentioned a lot of things I remember and kept to myself. It even mentioned things I'm not willing to talk about. And this book is basically a collection of people being put under hypnosis and the notes this doctor took of them remembering what happened to them. Anywho, that's all I have for today. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Feel free to ask any questions. I'm all for it. Case Notes, file number 644. So first of all, your family is wrong to blame you for this, and especially wrong to just be mean to you. I mean, you were young, and who could possibly avoid that anyways if you're faced with aliens or something you just don't understand? I mean, most of us would cry even as adults, or at least be petrified beyond belief. Like, I talk about aliens all the time on this channel, but in truth, if I really saw an alien, man, I would be freaked out. I wouldn't know what to do or think. Who would? And I guess it depends on the intent of the aliens, right? If they're actually friendly, and they're not trying to probe us, well, that's a different story. But my gut says at least some species of aliens are here to examine and study, and that they don't particularly care if they hurt those that they study, or just scare them out of their minds. I'm sure some people have been abducted, and the experience was so jarring that they killed themselves. There's no doubt that's happened. And I don't see those aliens going to their funeral. Not at all. Be careful out there. And who knows, maybe there are aliens among us. It seems like they were trying to study how to behave like us, at least as children. Trying to plant in their own kids, replacing ours with lookalikes, and they act the same. Almost like sleeper cells. Well, that's a terrifying thought. Case file number 645, written by Millennium Falcor. The Quantum Ring. Preface. A little over a decade ago, I was married to a man, and in the throes of a struggle with anorexia, which in hindsight I think was inflamed by my inability and refusal to look at the fact that I'm gay. Needing to believe that staying in my marriage was the right thing to do, I began obsessing over a very specific and unusual ring I wanted for a vow renewal. I hadn't gotten a ring the first time. This was a quantum or fantasy-cut mystic topaz in white gold. That's important. Just to stress the point of how strange a ring it was, I used to work in fine jewelry and never saw one like it come through my store. Fast forward 10 or so years, past my reconciliation with my sexual orientation, my coming out, my recovery from anorexia, and marrying a woman, to June of last year. I was preparing to go on a camping trip with my wife and 2 friends, and was getting a couple loads of laundry done before we had to leave. I heard something rattling around in the dryer, but naturally I assumed it was a quarter or a button or something. When the cycle was done, I went to retrieve the clothes, and as soon as I opened the door, something fell onto the floor, a 3-carat quantum fantasy-cut mystic topaz ring in 14K white gold. Incidentally, it is 3 times too small. I have turned this around in my brain so many times, examining it from every possible angle. The specificity of it is something I've never been able to get over. This is the kind of ring you have made custom, and it fell out of my freaking dryer. It wasn't until today that it struck me. Could this have belonged to me in another timeline? One in which I never left my ex-husband, never came out, never recovered. One in which I continued losing weight, had the vow renewal, and would need this very specific ring to be 3 sizes smaller than the size I wear here and now. Though my wife thoroughly believes it to be pure coincidence, I can't accept that. It's too weird. My wife, before this, did not know about the ring, or at least it's very unlikely. To my recollection, I never mentioned it to her. It was tied to another life with another partner, and a very painful time, which I didn't even really like thinking about, let alone discussing. I myself had put it out of my mind. It wasn't until I found it that all those pictures I'd saved to my old computer came rushing back to me. My wife and I wear the same ring size, also same shoe size, so it's unlikely she would have mistakenly bought, or more likely ordered given how unusual the ring is, such a small size ring. In case anyone is wondering, the ring is a size 5.25, and my wife and I each wear 8.5. We also don't have the kind of money to make such purchases. My wife does not believe in manifestation and is one of the most honest and authentic people I've ever known, so I can't imagine she would lie about not recognizing it. I don't know what she would stand to gain from it. It's extremely unlikely that my ex purchased the ring for me before we split up, and it could not have been hidden in my clothes only to come loose from a pocket after all these years. My ex was not a gift giver anyways, I think the only gift he ever bought me was a paperback book for one birthday. He was not a fan of the idea of a vow renewal, and I think my having the idea of the ring was largely an obsession or personal fantasy to distract me from the internal crisis I was avoiding. Further, my style and size have changed dramatically since he and I were together. I can think of only one other garment that I still own now that I owned at the time back then, and it's an oversized t-shirt I sometimes sleep in, no pockets. On the same theme, I now live in a different house in a different town, and have since a few months after he and I split up. Case notes, file number 645. So isn't that curious? A little coincidence baked right in the name that the type of cut is quantum-based, and this is perhaps a quantum-based glitch, where that yes, I do agree that it makes sense if the other you in another universe that was still anorexic never recovered and was still with your ex in that universe, and eventually that ex bought her the ring that you were fantasizing about. But of course, 3 sizes smaller. I mean, it does fit. Now how the ring got to this universe, I don't know. Perhaps it is related to the dryer. I mean, it is dark in there. Maybe in the absence of light, it's possible to cross over. Maybe that's one reason we fear the dark so much instinctively. Oh, and by the way, good work on being brave enough to be honest with yourself. Case file number 646, written by Due Time 8151. A glimpse of the past. Every Saturday, I take my son to swimming lessons. Every week it's a cluster getting there because this place is packed and chaotic. Every week, no matter how early I get there, finding parking is nearly impossible. Last Saturday, my parents offered to drop us off and pick us up since parking is so scarce and they have had a few errands to run in the area anyways. I happily accept their offer. They pulled us up right up to the entrance. I hopped out the back with my son's bag, went around to grab him from his car seat, and we were on our way. This Saturday, I was back on my own and happened to find a parking spot adjacent to the front entrance. I parked, grabbed my purse, and got out to get my son from the rear passenger side. On my way to the other side of the car, I saw my parents' car in the loading zone in front of the building. I was instantly confused, but before my mind could register anything further, the back door opens and it's me. Except it's me from last week. Same clothes and jacket I had on then. I got out with my son's bag and headed to the other side of the car. At that moment, a large van drove by, and when it passed, my parents' car was totally gone, and so was I. This all unfolded in no more than 5 seconds. However, I was so flustered and upset that I got back in my own car with my son and sat in the back seat with him for 20 minutes until I could compose myself. We missed swimming lessons and instead sat in the car and ate snacks and listened to music. I do not drink. I don't take any drugs or take any medication. I wasn't overly tired or upset or distracted that morning. I know what I saw and I'm freaked out. This wasn't a doppelganger. This was me last week. My husband has been treating me like I'm near a nervous breakdown since I've told him what happened and keeps asking me in different ways if I'm okay. I am totally fine and I know what I saw. Bonus file, written by Zoe X Bowie. Allow me to introduce you to my ghost cats. There has been a strange thing happening to me lately, and I'm not sure what exactly brought it on, but I think I may have several ghost cats living in my room. To preface, I've had many cats in my life, the most being 8 at a time, since I was little, so naturally I have had cats die, either from old age or illness. I've never felt anything like this before, however. It started recently, several weeks ago. As I would be settling into bed, I would feel something walking around like one of my cats. However, when I looked to see if one of my cats was actually there, there's nothing. I thought it was just me at first. It kept happening, but I figured maybe it was just my imagination. Well, starting last week, I decided to see what would happen if I didn't look at whatever was walking around my bed. And what happened was very strange. Whatever this thing was kept moving up the bed closer to me, and eventually there would be more than one wandering the bed and on top of me too. I could feel the weight of them, whether they are laying on my legs or my chest. Sometimes I can feel one against my back or side, as I usually sleep without a shirt on. I can feel heat coming off of something against my skin. I can even feel them breathing, which is the biggest indication I know they're there. But also this tingling sensation when they walk by or touch my skin. Whenever I move, they go away. Whenever I look, they do too. At night now, whenever I lay down, they immediately come out, either to snuggle, to lay on my legs, or to walk around. I'm not afraid of them. If anything, I love them and never want them to go away. I discovered that I can also make them come out in the daytime if I ask them to while I'm laying down. I did this today. There was one on my chest as I could feel it, so I tried to pet it, and I could feel my hand moving through something, like a barrier to its body. I guess my whole hand felt like static. It's so strange, but it's fascinating. I really do love my ghost cats. Has anyone else experienced something like this? I heard it's quite a common experience. Case file number 647, written by Ginger Cakes 19. Salami and cartoons for breakfast. Hi everyone. I'm still confused to this day. This happened when my child was 5 years old. They're about to be 13 now. I was laying in bed one morning, playing on my phone waiting for them to wake up. About an hour into mindless scrolling, and yes, I was wide awake, I heard them begin humming a cute little tune, skip to the refrigerator, open it and pull out lunch meat to snack on. They were stoked because I got the good stuff from the deli, so it was in the plastic bags and made a distinct sound when you opened it. Then they shut the fridge, happily skipped back to the living room while humming, turned on the TV and began playing an episode of some cartoon show. I heard the dialogue in the beginning of the episode for about 30 to 45 seconds before the sound kinda just faded out. It was silent again, and I was like, oh, they probably turned the TV down a little because it was so loud. I better get out of bed and stop being lazy. I can't leave them alone. So I get up and go into the living room and turn the corner to say, hi Zoe, except the TV was off and they were nowhere to be found. I walked into their bedroom. They were dead asleep. I walked in, sat on their bed and asked, did you just go back to sleep? They were very confused and a little annoyed that I woke them up. They had no clue what I was talking about, so I just let it go. I told them, well, you can get up and watch cartoons now if you want to. They got really excited and were like, okay, mommy. I had to pee, so I went into the bathroom and shut the door. That's when it happened. I heard them happily humming, skipping to the fridge. They opened it, grabbed the salami, shut the door, skipped back, happily humming that exact same tune, turned on the TV to the exact episode that I had heard before, and sat there, munching on salami for breakfast. Has anyone else had this happen? I've never had it happen since. Case file number 648, written by On the Next Mori, when you put a glitch inside of a garbage bag. I've been thinking about this for a month and decided against posting it because I thought it sounded inane, but it upended my view of reality. I moved recently. In my old house, there were a lot of items left by the previous tenant, who happened to be a friend, so they left me many items I needed as it was easier for both of us, but many unneeded items as well. I was standing in the bathroom with a trash bag at my feet that was slightly behind me, so I was taking items from the sink counter, then turning around and dropping them into the trash bag. This is important, because I literally could not have left the room. I was not moving my feet. At one point, I turned back and the trash bag is gone, along with everything in it. I checked the counter, drawers, floor, etc., and there was no sign of any of the items I threw away. I needed to be out of the house that day, and the entire time I moved, I looked for this bag. My roommate came home later and I begged them to believe me. It was the only trash bag I had of that color in the house, as it had come from my work and not the roll I had at home. Additionally, there was no curbside pickup at that location, so I had to drive all of our trash to the dump myself. I emptied the entire house and even steam cleaned the carpets. For the love of God, where is that bag? Case notes, file number 648. This garbage bag represents all of our lost items over the years. For some reason, whenever items are isolated, they can glitch out. I don't know if this is related to quantum mechanics and superposition, where the waveform has to collapse before it's realized. And remember, there is no hidden information, so it really is in a superposition. It doesn't exist in the conventional sense that we understand from classical physics. Anyways, not to bore you with that, my guess is actually when items go missing, even many items, they're being pulled to another dimension by other entities. I think it makes some sense. If we could perceive of a lower dimension where there are entities that couldn't see us, but we could see them and all their items, we would probably want to study them too, right? I'm just thankful that they don't routinely take us. Depressing in a way, because it's possible that all the alien encounters and abductions are actually just aliens from another dimension, not through space. And honestly, I wish aliens were just from another planet and they built spaceships to get here. That's much more cool, in my opinion. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. I've been walking out at night for, a month now, trying to get in at least 8 miles a day just to keep my fitness up. But I've yet to see anything weird in the sky, or anything weird at all for that matter. Hopefully I get to see something, even a garbage bag disappearing. That would do it for me. Come on, life, let's get real. Bonus file, written by Bluebell Lady. I finally met an angel. I grew up in an extremely religious household. I left that life behind around the age of 20 and began the journey of therapy and healing from a lot of the trauma I experienced. I don't consider myself religious and have an agnostic viewpoint. Until today, anyway. Today, my job felt like the worst possible place to be. Tensions have been running high and turnover has been high too. My boss and I had a difficult discussion in which he voiced that he's not sure I'm the right fit for the position. Now, I could go into what a narcissistic gaslighter he is, but I digress. During our meeting, one of the points I kept driving home to him is that I've lost all confidence in myself and my abilities. In fact, those exact words were said. After the meeting, I had a good cry, felt defeated, and started looking for a new job. To add to this, I've been battling severe anxiety and depression for a while now, recently with the odd thought of ending it all. Earlier this evening, I was out for a walk around my downtown neighborhood. There was a homeless man who kept standing out to me because he was wearing a jacket I remember selling back in my younger retail working days. Just as I was walking past him, he stopped me and said, "You look so confident." Me, the person who just told her boss that she felt like she had no confidence left in herself. Okay, I was listening now. He proceeded to tell me to remember that I have confidence, that I'm skilled, and that I have something to offer. He told me not to be scared of finding my partner or starting a family. Both things I spent a considerable amount of time worrying about. He told me I have a support system and that I'm not alone. I stood there stunned and have not felt the same since. I know I sound crazy, but truly, I think I finally met an angel. Bonus file, written by Excitable 1, The Invisible Visitor. When I was about 4 or 5, I was at my grandmother's home, several stories from there, and it was a rainy spring day. I remember playing in the living room since I couldn't go out, but the front door was open, although the screen and glass exterior door was still closed. I noticed an old man dressed in a black suit and white shirt and a large brimmed black hat standing at the end of the walk facing the door, 30 feet out or so. I remember he seemed out of place at the time and it struck me, even at a young age, as being disturbing. I ran to get my grandma because everything about it scared me. She sensed the terror I had and ran back to the front door area with me. When I looked down to the end of the walk, the man was nowhere to be seen. But chills ran down my spine as my grandmother placed a hand over my shoulder, proceeded to back up slowly, and started yelling, "You get out of here!" When I looked up at her, she had a glare in her eyes locked on the door and repeatedly yelled, "Get out of here!" I then looked at the upper half of the door where she was pointing and saw the old man standing what would have been inches from the glass portion, upper half of the door. But I had just been inches from the lower half, screen, and saw nothing. He only appeared in the upper half of the door. My grandmother backed us up into the hallway, and when we got there, she turned quickly and darted us off to the kitchen. I remember this so clearly. There were many other experiences in that home, but that one in particular stands out and has stuck with me my entire life. Case file number 649, written by Deep Mission 4998. My grandma's shirt. My maternal grandmother passed away in January. My mom was very close to her. I wasn't. She lives far away and I hadn't seen her since I was 13. When my mom went to gather some of her possessions, she brought me a shirt. A very distinct shirt. A small, petite-sized blouse, white with blue stripes and blue floral patterns. Croft and Barrel brand. I've had it in my possession for months. I was at my mom's house doing laundry yesterday. I have 2 laundry baskets, a wicker small basket, and a large white hamper. I laundered the clothes in the white hamper first. When I was folding the first load of clothes, the first shirt I took from the dryer was my grandma's shirt. I folded it and put it at the bottom of the white hamper and moved on. I did 2 more loads of laundry that day. The next load of clothes, I was checking them to see if they were dry, and I saw my grandma's shirt there. It's a very distinct shirt compared to the rest of my clothes. I don't wear a lot of stripes and I don't own another blouse. I was confused because I thought I had just folded it, but figured I was being forgetful. But the tag looked different. The brand said something different too. I figured maybe I was misremembering the brand. I was then asking myself, did my mom put this shirt in here? Did she give me 2 similar shirts? So I restarted the dryer and let them go longer. Then, when it stops, I folded and ended up coming across my grandma's shirt with a weird feeling. I folded it and put it in the wicker basket. Today, I'm putting away all my laundry. I emptied the white hamper first, and at the bottom is my grandma's shirt. Croft and Barrel, small size. At this point, I'm really confused. I move on to the wicker basket. No similar shirt in there whatsoever. And I just feel so weird and confused about it. What the hell happened? The day after she passed, I was very upset. I wanted to be alone, so I went to a creek, and I ended up finding 10 heart-shaped rocks in one spot. But yeah, that's my story. Not super dramatic, but what do y'all think? Case file number 650, written by JLo Main 97. Top 10 universes. Am I immortal or entering alternate realities? I've been in 2 high-speed car wrecks, both without a seatbelt, and walked away without a single bump. First, I was a passenger in my friend's 6 Series BMW, and we were seeing how fast it could go. It was raining lightly at night, and he lost control. We busted through a guardrail, rolled 150 degrees, and landed in the woods, stopped by a tree. I walked away without any injury, and he only busted his head open and had some bruises, but his seatbelt was on. Mine was not. Second, I was driving across country in an FJ Cruiser, no seatbelt on again, doing about 110, and I dozed off and smashed into a brick wall and rolled probably 5 times. I literally felt myself bouncing off the inside surfaces of the car as it rolled, and when it stopped, I was squatting down, and a cop somehow was already there and held open the door for me to climb out of. Again, I sustained no injuries. But the weird part was as they were questioning me, it felt like slow motion déjà vu. I literally knew everything they were about to ask me and what they were thinking, and then they would say it out loud. Most surreal moment of my life, and it convinced me this is really the Matrix, and we are all connected through the same interface. In December 2012, the Mayan apocalypse, I had another bad incident at my house which resulted in 2 days of brain scans and tests and being monitored by the hospital. But ultimately, I left totally healthy and not damaged or injured in any way. I feel like I'm in that show, The OA, and maybe I'm dying in one reality, then just popping into another one because it's not my time yet. I'm not religious, but there is a Bible verse that says something like, don't be anxious about anything because you can't add a single moment to your life. What if we have a predetermined expiration date, and if something fatal happens before it, you just go into an alternate reality? There have been several stories my mom has told me about at gatherings and dinner parties, etc., which I do not recall at all. Perhaps they only happened in the reality I entered after my near-death experience. Anyways, what are your thoughts, and does anyone have a comparable story? Case notes. File number 650. What you're experiencing sounds exactly like quantum immortality. You were in situations that were completely reckless. which by the way I do respect as your choice, but it did lead to situations where you almost certainly died in one universe, and now you're in a different one. It seems like it happened multiple times. Now, I don't know if this is biblically tied, that the universe is predetermined. In fact, through quantum physics, it's not. We can't actually know the position and velocity of particles before the waveform collapses. And that information isn't hidden. There's no local information. So it's not like the universe knows either. Literally nothing knows until the waveform is collapsed, and then we can measure one or the other. And only then is a particle truly realized. In effect, it's like a video game where environments and physics aren't loaded for objects that aren't in use or being rendered. It seems at the most fundamental level, that's how reality works too. So for us, to have anything predetermined is impossible. In fact, I think that's what the multiverse is. It's just many branching paths that life could take. Any direction or velocity that an atom could have, any emission from the EM field, or anything that could possibly be different from one universe to another always happens. So anything that physically could happen does happen in some universe. So the multiverse isn't infinite, but it does branch out to such an extreme that it would be impossible to even try to rationalize how many there are. I really enjoy the fact that the Marvel multiverse is a thing. I mean, it's getting people thinking about this in the pop culture and the mainstream, which is awesome. Now, I don't think they're going to cover quantum immortality exactly, but just the idea that people are getting out there and thinking that, yeah, we inhabit a multiverse. How cool is that? Everything that could possibly have happened to you probably did happen in some universe. So yeah, if you wanted to get with the prom queen, you probably did in one universe. Well, as long as it's physically possible. Maybe in another one you're a multimillionaire. Maybe in another one you discover how to cure cancer. One thing that's very interesting though about quantum immortality is, given the multiverse is so extensive, why is it that when we jump to another universe after we die, that we always seem to jump to a universe that is almost identical to the one we just came from? Is that a hard-coded rule? It seems to be. Maybe it's a distance thing. Maybe the multiverse branches out, but there's a physical distance between universes in the multiverse, and the closer the universe is that you jump to, the more similar it is to the original universe. And the further away it is, well, the more different it is. Could be a theory. Bonus file, written by Mammoth DM, in the spirit of intimidation. When I was in 4th to 8th grade, we moved into a century-old farmhouse in Strawtown, Indiana. My father was in and out of the picture at this point in my life, so most of the time it was only me, my mother, and 2 younger brothers living there. One was only a year younger than I, and the youngest was 0 to 4 during this time. The house always felt as though someone was watching you or breathing down your neck. I'm just going to list out the things that occurred for brevity's sake. My mom started seeing black shadows around the house. She said she could only smell him. Body odor would be smelled in a specific spot and not directly next to it. As time went on, she started seeing the imprint of someone sitting on the edge of her bed. Then, one night, it lay across her legs and she woke up thrashing to get it off. Me, I had the upstairs bedroom connected to the attic door through a small closet. These were huge rooms. Things were the least crazy for me. I would hear footsteps run up and down the stairs at night, and my brothers would be in bed. The scariest thing that would happen to me was that often, the door to the attic would swing open, as though someone forced it against the wall, and a cold presence would rush to my bedside. When I was 14, I started into a spiraling depression. I painted my walls blood red and began writing poetry and things on my walls in aggressive handwriting. Never have I felt or acted that way since. I have, however, had many instances of paranormal activity follow me throughout my life. My Irish twin brother had it bad. I only know fragments of his story, as what happened to him is something he'd rather forget. One night, he screamed in his room. We checked on him and he had been smacked. I thought it was him hitting himself in his sleep, but the handprint was upside down. Impossible to do to yourself. 15 years later, my mom told me she found him crying on the stairs one night. He was reluctant to tell her why, but when pressed, he told her he kept hearing voices telling him to kill all of us. My mom, understandably, kept this from us at the time. When I asked him about it, he was visibly upset and said it stopped as soon as we moved from that house. My youngest brother was 2 to 3 when he started saying weird stuff. He would see Boots walking around the house with nobody attached. He'd also hear laughing when he'd get near the basement steps. I remember the 4 of us kneeling and praying that this entity would leave us alone. It didn't. We decided to leave after a morning when my mom and youngest brother were home alone. They were taking a nap when the bed and dresser started violently shaking. No earthquakes in the area. They shook by themselves, and what my mom said was intimidation. We moved out. Was told by a neighbor that everyone else that has moved in afterward moved out within a few months. It's empty now. I still drive by it sometimes and want to go confront whatever is there and get answers. The landlord is an old farmer that doesn't believe in it. This has been the first time I've posted my story online. These are some of the things that have happened since I've moved on with my life. In several different houses since, I've heard strange noises of objects moving in other rooms and deliberate knocking. Not super frequent though. In one house, we had a painting of "Delight yourself in the name of the Lord" up in the dining room. Heard a crash and found it 5 feet to the right, blocking the bathroom entrance. Would also hear razors and shampoo bottles being tossed in the bathroom at that house. In another, I had 2 friends over playing poker in the kitchen when, as we were talking about a shelf that came off my wall the night before, a plastic blender cup was chucked out of the pantry behind us and bounced off the wall. Case file number 651, written by Chef Fuzzy, the good boy, Sam. Hello, I have never ever told this story to anyone, but I've kept it in my mind since it happened in 1998. I just want to preface by saying I've never held a belief in ghosts, the afterlife, or anything of the sort, either past or present. Even this event is not enough to make me believe ghosts are real. However, I do not have any material explanation for the event. It was mid-August 1998. I was 22 years old and working a summer job at a gas station before heading back to school. I had started college late as I fumbled about for about a year or 2 after high school. Anyways, on a nice warm summer night, cars would come and go. As we had a full-service pump, I'd walk out of my little storefront for every car and pump their gas. The weather was perfect, not too hot when normally it would be blistering hot that time of year. Around the side of the building were the entrances to the bathrooms. I headed that way to use the restroom when I saw 2 hippie-looking teens with a dog, a boy and a girl. I grew up listening to bands like the Grateful Dead and Fish, still do. And while I don't present as a hippie, I feel very comfortable in those circles. I could tell these kids had probably been hitchhiking. They didn't look destitute, but they were dirty and probably a bit hungry. Even though I was probably no more than 5 years older than them, I felt bad and wanted to help. I put a few bucks in the vending machine, bought them some snacks and drinks, and gave the dog a bowl of water. They were very thankful, and the doggy was very friendly. We chatted for a minute, then the boy said, "The dog is not ours. He was just hanging out here. He was friendly, so we just started playing and patting him." That was strange, of course, but not too crazy, right? Dogs get lost all the time. He was friendly and didn't look too mistreated, so I just assumed he had gotten lost. Oh, and he had a collar and tag. Cool, I can find his owner. Oh, and his name, Sam. Important to note that he would respond to me calling his name as Sam. A car pulled up to the full-service pump, so I ran out and did my thing. Last I looked, the hippies and Sam were still hanging out at this time, sorta off to the side of the store, near where I first saw them. I finished up with the car and turned around to head back to the storefront. No hippies anywhere in sight. Nowhere, just gone. Perhaps they hitched a ride while I was turned around, but it was only a minute. When I walked out to the street, I could see quite a ways in both directions. They were nowhere to be seen anywhere. This is the last I saw of the 2 hippie kids. I hope they're okay. Sam, though, was still there, but it was getting late. I wanted to help. I decided to call the local police, who gave me the phone number of the animal shelter. I called over there, and the way that it was handled seemed very odd at the time, and still does, but I wanted to help, so I went along with it. Sam was a good boy after all. The person I spoke with at Animal Control looked up Sam's info based on the dog tag number. This person, instead of saying, "Hold on, we will send out an officer," or even just call the owner, instead they gave me Sam's owner's phone number and told me to call them. I called the number and an older man politely answered the phone. I explained I had Sam. I gave him water and he's just hanging out with me here, but the gas station is closing soon, so it would be best for you to come pick up Sam. He seemed perplexed and asked me to describe Sam to him. I did. Sam looked like a mutt lab mix, darkish brown coat, a medium large sized dog, very friendly disposition, just a regular old good boy. What the man said next has been rattling around my brain for the last 24 years. The man said, "We had a dog named Sam, but he passed away a good 10 years ago." I was dumbfounded and all I could do was describe Sam again, to which the man said, "Yeah, that sounds like Sam, but no way it could be. It just can't be." He was polite and we talked back and forth a bit more, but with no resolution, we hung up. I was unsure what to do next, but I quickly realized that there was nothing for me to do. Just like the hippie kids, Sam too was nowhere to be seen. He had just vanished from inside the store. I would give anything to have this make sense, to be able to actually resolve this in a way that makes sense. I've never been able to. I have lots and lots of theories, but I have no resolution. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. Case file number 652, written by Rory. A truly astronomical coincidence. I heard about this glitch in the Matrix subreddit through a podcast and thought it was the right place to share my story and hopefully get some good insight and opinions from people who may have experienced or know of something similar. In 2012, when I was 16 years old, me and my 6 friends went to Thorpe Park, theme park here in the UK. The new ride, The Swarm, had just opened, so of course we were going straight there. We queued for about 45 minutes before being sent to the stands. I have no idea what these are called, the things you stand between waiting for the next carriage to arrive. On the second row of about 12 rows, the carriage ahead had just been loaded and a very large black dude, probably at least 6'7", was placed in his seat. As the ride was about to go, an attendant came over and told this guy he was too big to ride and had to go wait outside for his party to finish the ride. Now this guy was absolutely huge, a big afro and basically incredibly memorable. Anyway, after we had been on the ride, I again remember seeing him outside with his friends. They were loudly taking the piss out of him for not being allowed on, basically. Fast forward about 14 months and we went to Thorpe Park again. I believe it was more or less the same group of friends I went with before, maybe give or take 1 or 2 people. Again, we of course went on Swarm. We waited around 45 minutes again, and we were sent to the same stands again, second from the front, with my 3 friends who came on the road the last time. As the ride was about to leave, an attendant came over and told a certain gentleman he was too big to ride. As I looked over, it was the exact same person as before. I know for an absolute fact this 6'7" humongous man was the same person. I remembered him distinctly, everything was the same. The way he climbed out of the chair, walked off and went outside. The only thing I don't remember is whether or not it was the same attendant, as I was honestly so flabbergasted by what I was seeing. I turned to my friends and said, "What the hell? That's the same guy from last time in the exact situation as last time." Nobody paid much attention to me, but sort of acknowledged it. Maybe nobody remembered the time before like I did. I kept going on for a good few minutes, but nobody seemed to listen or care. By the time we got off the ride, this time he wasn't waiting with his friends, the only notable difference. One of the things that I always found odd about this is the fact I never remembered seeing this guy in line both of the times I went. 45 minutes wait each time, and I never once noticed this guy standing, where he would have been, like 30 people ahead of me. And trust me, with the huge afro and 6'7", he would have been easily noticed, unmistakably. Since then, I have mentioned it maybe twice to my friends who were there and they all look at me like I was crazy or I vaguely remember something, probably just wanting me to stop talking. I understand this may not be an exciting story for some. I'm just hoping somebody could have experienced something similar. My own assessment is that it was really just the biggest coincidence, and it just so happened to myself and this guy ended up going in the exact same theme park on the same days twice in a row, on the same ride at the exact same time in the exact same situation as 14 months previous. But that is near impossible, right? Case notes, file number 652. So you are correct that this could just be a coincidence. However, this would not be my instinct. Whenever there are crazy coincidences like this, well, it's not that I don't believe in coincidences like the saying goes. I would just say that if something happens multiple times that seems impossibly connected, then there's a good chance it is. I think there's a good chance that for whatever reason, the developers of this server, or maybe some other force, whatever you want to call it, wanted you two to interact, and this was just a way to force a meeting. Now, I don't know what would happen if you did talk to him, but if you ever see this person again, I say, go say hi. Who knows why, but I think it's important. Case file number 653, written by Predzjenik Planet. What's the point of a car that can just teleport? This happened to me about 2 years ago. I was driving on a detour road next to the city so I wouldn't get stuck in the city's rush hour. At the end of that road, there is an intersection with 2 lanes going left to a one-way road and the right lane that goes to the airport. I remember another car getting so close behind me that I cursed something about it. The light went green and we started driving. I turned left and looked in my inner mirror to see where the car was, because I got mad recently, and he was nowhere to be seen. I kept looking behind because I thought he might have gone right at the very last second. He didn't. There were no cars around me anywhere. I thought about it for the next 5 minutes and kinda let it go. Fast forward to one day when I'm with my friend talking about random things in life. He starts talking about how something strange happened to him in the same spot. I knew what he was going to say before he even said it. I let him speak and I was correct. The same intersection. He was going left and after turning, the cars behind him weren't there anymore. This was the only glitch in the matrix that I remember experiencing, and it was shared with my friend. Case notes, file number 653. You know, it makes you wonder, were those cars bound to our reality, our dimension? There's tons of objects that disappear and return. The exact cause of this is unknown. Maybe there are entities in another pocket dimension that are pulling them in just to examine and study them. It stands to reason that they would want to study larger objects, but why at this specific intersection? You'd think that would make it more obvious, and that if in fact these are entities, they would want to remain incognito. So maybe it isn't entities, maybe it is some sort of ley-lined force in this exact spot that is pulling objects in. I wonder if they come back, and obviously, what about all the people inside of them? Or was it merely a perception glitch? The cars were never there, you just perceive them to be, for some reason. That it also happened to your friend does lead me to the idea that it is some kind of force in that specific intersection area. I wonder if all the people in those cars perceive themselves as having jumped ahead a few miles or something. There's many stories about people being ported ahead in cars especially, so maybe it's related to that. Creepy file number 25, written by Stinkyuho 13, The Shadow of the Night. This story occurred a few years back. I would have been around 8 or 9 at the time. My old bedroom sat facing out towards the street and also happened to be right next to our front door. It was very small as it had been built in place of our old front porch. The roof was slightly slanted downward towards the window, which took up most of the wall, and the bed could only fit in one way. It was painted purple, not a nice purple either, like a kid's bedroom, of course. My bed sat facing towards the door to my bedroom, parallel to the window. A closet took a part of the corner between my bedroom door and the window, making for an unusual space. Every night, I checked to make sure the curtains were shut all the way, as the idea of people watching from the street made me very uncomfortable, even at a young age where things like that shouldn't even cross my mind. Every night, I slept soundly, no nightmares, no sudden noises waking me in the middle of the night, nothing like that. That was until the middle of the year, during a school break. I remember waking to the sound of someone breathing. I couldn't move. I couldn't catch my own breath. I was just stuck. I remember so clearly seeing a man standing in the corner of my room, stuck partly behind the curtain as if it would hide him. Of course, I could see him. He was just this dark entity who stood and watched. After what felt like hours, I was able to get back to sleep. In the morning, I told my mom about it and what had happened, and she explained it was just a strange nightmare and that I was fine. But the way she said it wasn't very believable. These cases of sleep paralysis went on for about a year, taking me up to the middle of the next year when I was likely 8 or 9. I remember waking in the middle of the night just like I had most nights for the last year to the man in the corner, only this time I could move. I stayed absolutely still, despite now knowing he was actually there. This wasn't sleep paralysis. I could hear his faint breathing, like he was trying to hide from me as much as I was trying to hide from him. I couldn't help but think, has this man been here every night this year? I remember the thoughts I had, how I'd run out of the room and scream for my mom, how she'd call the police, how this man would be arrested and sent away. But I couldn't do that. He was basically in front of the door. I spent the night staring at him, trying to fall asleep. I'd say it was around 5 a.m. I was able to drift off, just sort of as the birds started to wake up. I woke up and lo and behold, he was gone. The first thing I did was tell my mom. She already looked uneasy, like she already knew. That's when I heard 2 people talking outside. I found out later the people outside were my neighbor and a police officer who was taking an eyewitness statement. Around 6 in the morning, our neighbor spotted a man standing outside my window. She called the police, but he was gone before they arrived. Other neighbors stepped forward saying they'd seen him outside in the middle of the day, looking at our house. There were no signs of forced entry, only 2 footprints in the flower bed outside my window. My mother told the officers my account of what had happened, and they came to the conclusion that he'd done the same thing last year. I saw it, and it sparked my tangent of sleep paralysis. The streetlight outside projected his shadow, so it appears as though he was standing in my room. This whole time, he'd been waiting patiently outside my room. Who knows what would have happened if my neighbor didn't spot him on her way out for work? Just a few more minutes and she would have missed him entirely. Bonus file, written by Alethi Will Shaper. A dark force occupies my hospital. So, to preface this, I work in a hospital on the SCU, monitoring patients' heart rates. Additionally, I also do not have any mental illness aside from seasonal depression and anxiety, since I know the first thing someone is going to say is, maybe you should get checked for psychosis. Yesterday, I was doing my normal routine of running patient reports to the different floors that we monitor, and after having a bit of an annoying encounter with a nurse who yelled at me, I was brooding a bit as I walked down the hall. I had my eyes on the floor as I walked, and as I got towards the ICU, so that I could access the stairwell. Our hospital is fairly small, so the SCU and the ICU share a floor. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a person standing by the elevator, staring at me. So like I normally do, I looked up to ask if they needed any help with anything, and for the millisecond that I made eye contact, what I saw was truly horrible. It was a being composed entirely of black or wearing all black, except for his hands. It had these long claws that were unnaturally white, like it hadn't seen sunshine in years, and I couldn't see the face for some reason, but I know it had these big bulging eyes set recessed into its head. The moment I saw it, truly saw it, I froze in place and blinked because it was startling. I didn't feel terrified, but it did make me uncomfortable. And when I opened my eyes from that quick blink, it had disappeared. I'm not sure what I saw, but this isn't the first time I've seen something in that building. Bonus file, written by Anonymous. My son sent us a sign. I would really like to share this experience with you guys. I've never told anyone this before because when I talk about stuff like this, people look at me like I'm nuts, but I'm not. A little backstory. My son died when he was 3 years old, back in 2018. He had cancer and battled it all his life. Fast forward to 2020. I was living in a house with my mom and sister and her boyfriend. We were sitting in our garage one night and all of a sudden, we saw a light flickering on a shelf in the very back of the garage. My sister's boyfriend went to see what it was. The light was coming from one of my mom's old phones that had been sitting in that spot for 2 years. It was all busted up and had never been charged in those 2 years. My sister's boyfriend picked it up and it stopped blinking. We tried to turn it on, but it was dead. We didn't think anything of it at first and sat it down on one of my son's Mickey Mouse coloring books. As soon as that phone touched his coloring book, it started flashing again. He picked it up and it stopped flashing. Set it down again on the coloring book, and again it started flashing. At this point, I was calling out to my son to see if it was him. I was asking him to give me a sign that it was him, and then the phone turned on. There was a random jumble of letters and numbers on the screen, but right there amongst the jumbled letters and numbers, it said Mickey Mouse. At that point, I knew it was him. I cried hysterically. We all did. We went inside with the phone and showed it to my mom and told her what happened. She couldn't believe it. The phone stopped flashing and I held it for a few hours to see if it would do it again. We were all about to go to bed, so my sister stood up and turned off the living room light. I set the phone down on our fireplace in the living room by a little cross and Bible. We were all about to go to our rooms when the light on the phone came on again. The light on the phone was pointed directly at the cross and casted a big shadow on the cross. The shadow of the cross covered one of our entire living room walls. All of our mouths dropped wide open. We all knew he was showing us a sign that he was okay. We all prayed together and talked to him that night. After that, the phone never turned on again, never flashed a light again either. I tried to charge it the next day and it never turned on. This is one of many experiences we've had since he died. It just lets me know there is more out there than we will ever be able to understand. Case file number 654, written by Bongman31. My TV told me to shut up. So it was 2008 or 2009, I can't remember exactly. It was around the time that the USA was phasing out antenna TVs, and there was this huge push to get the digital converter boxes. I'm sure lots of you remember this. So like many people, my family only had cable in the living room. All other TVs, including the one in my bedroom, needed the converter boxes. The converter boxes finally come, and I'm tasked with hooking them up in my room, my parents' room, and my sister's room. I get them all hooked up, and all is well for the first day. The next day, I noticed that periodically, my TV would get a large black box that would appear perfectly centered in my TV, and would take up about 60 to 70% of the screen, and all anyone could see was the outer border. This would happen multiple times daily, and only ever to my TV with my converter box. My parents didn't want to go through the hassle of replacing it, so I just had to deal with it. Oh well, fine. Months go by, and my best friend would come over and hang out all the time. We would play games and watch TV daily, so he has also seen the strange box that appeared on my TV multiple times daily. Now, the news is on, and I remember it was some interview with Reverend Al Sharpton. I don't recall exactly what it was about, but my friend and I both disagreed and were just acting obnoxiously and talking general crap about Al Sharpton and whatever he was harping on about. It is immediately after that the black box takes over the screen, except this time, in white letters and all caps inside that box reads, "Shut up," with at least 8 exclamation marks. We are both stunned and just immediately stare in silence at the screen. It wasn't subtitles. It wasn't closed captioning. It wasn't a hallucination. Someone, somehow, inserted those letters on my screen at the exact moment on purpose. Who it was or what the purpose is, I have never known, and it's driving me crazy thinking about it all these years later. The message stayed on the screen for at least 2 full minutes, and then just disappeared. This was the catalyst for both of us to start our journey through all things strange and conspiratorial, and I've never heard of anything similar happening to anyone else. We tore apart the converter box later that night, looking for any kind of transmitter device or microphone, but couldn't find anything of the sort. Of course, we had no experience with these things and were just teenagers, so entirely possible something was there that we just missed. I put the box back together and plugged it back in, just waiting and hoping another message would appear or something would come from it, but it never did. Neither of us have ever forgotten about it though, and we both wish we could know how it happens and why. Case notes, file number 654. I'm not sure how much of a conspiracy this is exactly. I know there's a lot of appliances now that have recording devices, and it's possible that these were experimental. This was essentially a test run, just to see how well it could perform. And then you combine this with maybe a disgruntled employee that was tasked with listening in. It kind of makes me think about current modern day social media, where there's plenty of big tech sites that have a lot of censorship, and not all of it is automated. Sometimes individual people have to do the appeal work and actually look at what was said. Of course, we're just humans, so sometimes things are misinterpreted, or maybe just that person's bias comes through. Because really, that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like someone was at the other end listening in when they weren't supposed to, and they certainly weren't meant to make their presence known. But they did. Because whatever you were saying about Al Sharpton was really messing with their head and pissing them off. Although maybe it was some sort of spirit influencing the EM field of the TV to generate a message, but the fact there was a black box on the TV screen many times before this message appeared leads me more towards the tech side of things and human beings. Case file number 655, written by Elgish, my uneasy best friend. Guys, I'm freaking the hell out. I've been thinking about this for hours and I can't stop. This happened maybe 10 hours ago. I don't know if this story is exactly a glitch, but I felt weird during all of it. I made plans today to go shopping somewhere in another city with my boyfriend. I was in my hometown, waiting at the bus stop, so I could get to the city by bus. After about 25 to 30 minutes of waiting, this girl who looked exactly like my best friend comes here waiting at the same bus stop. I thought it was strange that she came by to my hometown for no reason. She lives 1 hour away and is supposed to be in a college class. She has no reason to be here besides seeing me. I thought it was her, so I went up to her to catch up, obviously. I shouted her name eagerly and went in for a hug, but this girl looked horrified. She was not her, apparently, even though she had the same hair color, skin complexion, height, clothing style, body type, and even the same freaking voice, and of course the same face. I got too scared, so I just told her I must have mistaken her for someone else and quickly scurried away so that I could wait somewhere else. I texted my friend asking if she has any relatives that look a lot like her, or perhaps an identical twin sister whom she was separated from at birth who might have been waiting at the bus stop in my small hometown. She only has a brother that kind of resembles her, but no identical twin that she knows of. I'm not sure what happened today. My boyfriend can't find an explanation either. The thing is, I felt extremely uneasy seeing her before talking to her for some reason. Case file number 656, written by Happy Housewives 82. Time has no master. It does what it wants. When I was 17 years old, my friend and I had a really fun Saturday. She had a convertible car and we would drive around playing music and talking. We are still friends and have always had really good talks about the paranormal and universal glitches, even as teens. I have actually always been intuitive and had paranormal interactions as she has. Anyway, she ended up coming to my house and I'm the oldest of 5 kids. My bedroom was actually a breezeway that people would walk through to get to the garage, a basement and laundry room too. So usually, if a friend slept over, we slept in the TV room which had 2 sliding glass doors in the dining room. If you walked through the dining room, you would get to the kitchen. There was a wall, so you couldn't see if anyone was sitting at the kitchen table until you walked in. It was the 90s, so we didn't have cell phones, so no alarm. And there was a clock that chimes on the hour in that TV room. The clock chimed and we both woke up on the 2 couches and talked for a few minutes about our Sunday plan. Some of our friends had mentioned wanting to go to the beach, so we figured we would go call them. The clock said 8 a.m. when it chimed. We got up and walked into the kitchen, but no one was awake. 4 small kids and 2 parents just still asleep at 8 a.m. wouldn't make sense. So we looked at the clock in there and it said 6:30 a.m. Okay, maybe the clock in the TV room was wrong. We both go and lie back down talking for a few and then we decide to go back to sleep and wake up and call our friends about the beach later. We wake up this time because my sister comes in the room excited to see my friend. We hear the 2 sliding glass doors open, and she comes in waking us up loudly. So we trudge into the kitchen and my mother and father are sitting looking tired and they say, "Sorry they woke up so early today." And we kept her out as long as we could. She's been up since 5 a.m. I look quickly at the clock and it's 6:15 a.m. I'm so confused, but then sometimes I have lucid dreams and very vivid dreams, so I assume I dreamt the thing before. We chat for a minute and I ask my friend if she's ready to call our friends and she just says, no, I have to go, and she leaves in a hurry. When I called her later to check in because I thought maybe something happened, she said, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but..." And she proceeded to tell me exactly what I experienced. She had experienced too. And I laughed and explained I had the same thing happen and thought I'd just been lucid dreaming. We are now almost 40 and we still talk about that day and theorize on why and how it happened to both of us. We haven't told many people because we did tell our friends, but they thought we made it up and our family just said we probably smoked too much pot. We know that some sort of glitch happened, and it's led me to where I am today. Bonus file, written by After Employer 5610. When a doll laughs without a doll. So when I was 7 or 9, I don't remember what age I was exactly. I had this doll that was about as tall as a German Shepherd dog. This doll had a voice box where if you pressed it, the doll would laugh and giggle for about 30 seconds. This voice box was placed in a pocket in the back of the doll's dress. Eventually, I kinda got annoyed with the voice box due to it going off a lot. Before this incident, I had thought that some stuff behind it was pressing it, or that the pocket was sewn on too tightly, so it was pressing the box when there was pressure on the pocket. So, as I said, I got annoyed by the box. I emptied out a drawer and placed the box in the drawer. I had closed the drawer carefully so as to not move the box in the slightest. After this, I went to sleep. At maybe midnight, I had woken up to the sound of the box coming from the doll. The doll I had made sure to place on the opposite side of the room from the drawer the box was in. Forgetting for a minute that I had taken the box out of the doll, I tried to go back to sleep. About 5 minutes later, I remembered where I put the box and got up to open the drawer. It was still there, exactly where I had left it. A few weeks later, I got rid of the doll. However, for a few years after that, I could still hear the laughter of the doll's voice box, and it was very loud. I only remembered this incident when I had found one of my porcelain dolls on the kitchen counter. My mom had moved it there for some reason. Case file number 657, written by Master Advantage 5833, the most ominous neighborhood in the world. To begin, I was not high when these events happened. I was in a car with a few of my friends driving around to find a spot to park and smoke. These events took place a couple of months ago. I'm a college student in a very small North Carolina town. It's a population of about 3,000 people, and the town is less than 3 square miles, with most of it being one long road leading to and from the big cities. The demographic here is pretty much exclusively old people. One thing to support this is the amount of funeral homes on every corner. My friends and I have always talked about how it's creepy being that it's such a small town, but it makes sense because the people are all much older. One day, the 5 of us pack into our friend's car and start to drive around. We're looking for somewhere that's kinda discreet since it's still daylight out, but not just blatantly on someone's property. We pull into a neighborhood that looks pretty typical. Simple one-story houses that all look the same, until they didn't. We turned into a road that split off into a cul-de-sac. The moment we turned onto this road, I got a sinking pit in my stomach, as if we were somewhere we're not supposed to be, like we had broken something in the universe, or accidentally shifted dimensions. I remember looking at my roommate next to me in the back seat and instinctively murmuring, "We shouldn't be here." Each of the houses with the cul-de-sac were extremely unique and different. One was a pretty sunshine yellow, narrow 2-story house. One was a wider and more full blue and purple house. One looked like a normal suburban 1-story beige house, but instead of beige, it was a deep maroon color. And the last one, all the way on the right, was a dark gray house with black trim. Each of the houses were very close together and had different yard decorations, from big extravagant Easter bunnies and Easter eggs, to random gnomes, to Christmas trees, to wagons all over. They were scattered about like landmines. The dark house had shovels scattered about, but no holes in the ground that implied digging. The cul-de-sac had a long, narrow, grassy median/island that you drive around to enter and leave. All of us in the car had an overwhelming urge to leave immediately, so we made our way around the little island. As we got around it, we looked at the dark house again. A man stood on the side of the house, facing us but standing completely still. He was a black man wearing yellow with blue overalls and a dark shadow in front of his face. I don't know if it was hair or some sort of covering, but his face was not visible. We sped off and out of the neighborhood, worried that maybe he'd think we were trespassing and shoot us, something you always have to be prepared for in rural North Carolina. This was the rational worry at the time, but in the moment, we felt an energy so powerful it could have pinned us to the ground if it tried. It felt all-knowing and maybe even evil. We left without issues, but all of us felt the same pit in our stomachs like we saw something we weren't supposed to. The weirdness doesn't stop there though. When recalling the events, our stories all match up until recalling the man in the yard. We all saw someone, but the 5 of us each have a very different description of the person. One of them saw a little girl in a dress, somebody else saw a woman in white, someone else a man with a long beard and a guy wearing what looked like a dark suit. Each recollection of the memory, the person stood frozen in the exact same spot on the side of the house. To this day, we have no idea what we encountered or what exactly happened. It freaked all of us out and we swore to never go back. I'm typing this while it's still extremely fresh. I spent all day, Tuesday, looking for the neighborhood via maps and eventually found it. The neighborhood looked a lot different when seeing the satellite and street views, but the images were from 2013, so I attributed it to that. I decided to go back with my roommate and our friend who was driving that day. Upon pulling into the neighborhood, we all realized it looked very different. The same island and median was there, but it looked like the satellite images I had seen before. We all recalled the houses we had previously seen, particularly referencing the yellow house we had seen that was no longer there. We were all so sure of the yellow house that we were able to recall a conversation about that house. There was one house that was there that we all had a memory of being there the first time. There was another house that my roommate and other friend remembered and said it was where they both saw the person they saw. It was a white house, not the dark house from before. I didn't remember the white house at all, but sure, I could have missed it the first time. However, I know for a fact that I had seen the man by the dark house the first time. There was one house that stood out to us that we didn't remember. It was an eerie look at a brick house that looked like no one had lived there for years. I went back to the neighborhood fully expecting it to look the same way, only for it to be almost completely different. No decorations, houses had been replaced, but the energy was still extremely off. I was prepared for the shift in energy, so I don't think it affected me as much as the others. They both had full body goosebumps and felt sick. I've attached some images here. The first picture is the brick house that wasn't there the first time. The second picture is the white house they both apparently saw the person at. And the third picture is the house we all remember. Case notes, file number 657. My first impression as I'm reading this is that your entire group had memories implanted. Although they weren't a perfect match, and I imagine if someone is able to implant memories, it wouldn't be an exact science. In many science fiction shows, there's technology that can be employed to recreate memories in someone's head exactly, down to minute details. But I don't think, if it's ever possible in real life, that it would be ever so precise. The brain is sort of a quantum computer. There are quantum states that are more like making suggestions rather than programming in binary exact sequences. I don't know if that is ever possible, even for aliens with advanced technology. Now, do I think this is aliens? Well, I'm not sure about that, since you didn't report any time loss. It actually strikes me more as some sort of government experimental area, which makes sense in a rural setting, away from most people. Maybe they were testing some sort of frequency device that was messing and altering with people's perception. That's why everyone saw something different than the other. It would also explain why the houses are back to normal now. The government probably sold that off as a defunct experiment, if that is what it was. Bonus file, written by Substantial Yan, 2086. In Vega, people die in threes. I come from a village called Vega, on a small island in the Caribbean called Trinidad. We had a saying in my village, When a person dies in Vega, they drag down 2 others with them, or simply, people die in threes in Vega. When I was a young boy, an old man from my street named Sundar died. He was drunk and fell out of the passenger door of a truck while it was driving. It rolled over him. Directly across the street from Sundar was a mentally unstable man whose wife and children had left him. He committed suicide by drinking herbicide days after Sundar died. Apparently, he didn't dilute it either. The spot on the sidewalk where he vomited was grass-free for almost a year after he died, while grass grew all around it. I would stand on that clean spot for the bus. A guy from next door also died the following week. 3 men from 3 close-by houses within a few days of each other. Fast forward to last year. My uncle Suk died from a stroke. During the wake, I heard one of my cousins say, "Let's wait and see who Suk is dragging down with him." Then, the following week, another of my relatives died from the virus. Imagine a main street with 3 side streets on the right side. Uncle Suk died in his home, the 3rd house on the 1st street. My other relative died in his home, the 3rd house on the 3rd street. Because it was a virus death, we couldn't gather at the house of mourning for fear of folks catching the virus, so we all gathered at my cousin's house instead, which incidentally was the 3rd house on the 2nd street. During the wake, I realized we were directly in the middle and all 3 houses were in a straight line, even though they were on 3 different streets. I joked that since our uncle died in the house a street down, and our other uncle died in the house a street prior, and the house we were at now was lined up perfectly in the middle, that the people living in that house should be careful to not complete the 3. It was a joke. We all laughed. My cousin from that house died in a car accident the next week. People die in threes in Vega. Case file number 658, written by Dozer 2K16. When my girlfriend laughs, but my girlfriend never laughed. Tonight, I spent the night at my girlfriend's house, as I often do. There was a brief 10 or so minute period where we went to her sister's room and just talked with her. We had returned to my girlfriend's room after this short amount of time, to where she could not find her phone. So as most people would do, I FaceTimed it, so she could find it in the midst of all the blankets. Within a few seconds, the phone was found and she jokingly answered and said, "Hello." I made a funny looking face with my tongue sticking out, and she jokingly made a "what the hell" kind of face and then hung up. However, that's the weird part. When the call was hung up, from my phone's speakers there was a giggle, her giggle, which is a very distinct sound that we both know well. In person, as we sat on our bed, there was no giggle, just the face she was giving back to me. At first, I thought nothing of it, like, oh, maybe I'm just hearing things. Then, she goes on to talk about the face I was making, but then adds, "I don't think I laughed though." Then I knew it really happened. We both think it is extremely creepy and strange. Case file number 659, written by The World to Come. Water to wine, but water to mud? Even more impressive. I always just buy those bulk plastic water bottles at the store. I pull one out of my refrigerator and drink from it, and once I'm done, I crumple it up, throw it in the recycling bin, and grab another one from my refrigerator. I never ever reuse one of those water bottles, just throw it in the recycling bin. As usual, I'm at home. I live alone, no pets or roommates or anything. I had taken a new water bottle out of my refrigerator and opened it, and drank about half of it. I went to the bathroom, which is in the other room, for about 2 minutes and came back out. Habitually, I grabbed my water bottle and took a big sip, and, horrifically, ran to the sink and spit everything out. It was a type of reaction you have if you ever bitten into food and gotten a completely different taste than you expected. I dropped the water bottle as well in the process because I was so shocked at what just happened. The water I had just drank had a very grassy, earthy, muddy taste to it. The remainder of the water in my water bottle was murky brown, and the water bottle and water smelled grassy. I was in shock for a bit on what had just happened. I was just drinking out of this water bottle 2 minutes earlier before I went to the bathroom. I checked the lot number on the water bottle in case it was an old water bottle that had gotten misplaced in the back of my refrigerator and just been sitting there for years with the water going bad, but the lot number was the same as all the most recent water bottles I had just bought. Again, I live alone. All my doors were locked. I checked if anyone was in the apartment, but no one was. Like I said, I don't ever reuse or refill my water bottles when they're empty. I have no explanation. I did keep the water bottle as physical evidence and had my mom and sister smell it and tell me what it smelled like. They both agreed it was like muddy water. Case notes, file number 659. Here I am thinking of the classic biblical parable of Jesus turning water into wine. But why would anyone ever turn water into muddy water, even if they could? And who was it that did this? Was it some force of nature that converted your perfectly clear water into muddy water? And how would it go about doing this? Did someone sneak into your apartment and bring in mud and dump it into the water bottle and then just leave? Maybe one of your friends was pranking you? That's the only thing I can think of that makes any sense. If anyone has your apartment key, then that would be the most likely event. But still, even that is very strange. I know if I did something like that, I'm a prankster, I would definitely take credit for it, at least after a day or two. Creepy file number 26, written by Liquid Pen Chamber 1019. I'm always watching. This happened to me when I was about 10 years old, but even now as an adult in my 30s, I remember it like it was yesterday. My parents had taken my sister and I out to a movie, and then to get ice cream in celebration of my older sister getting straight A's on her report card. I remember my dad had gotten off work later than usual, so by the time the movie was over and we had our ice cream, it was well past our bedtime. It didn't matter though. My parents were happy and proud of my sister. We had a great time, and we took our time getting home. If it wasn't for what happened when we got there, I would have always looked back fondly on this night. We got home at around 10:30. Bedtime was usually 10, so I went straight to my room to put my pajamas on while my sister went to brush her teeth. I remember thinking that it seemed a little more chilly in the house that night, but that's the only thing out of the ordinary I can recall from when we first walked in. I barely had a chance to change when I heard my dad yell out our names from what I thought was the kitchen. I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew it was bad because I heard fear in his voice for the first time ever. It scared me really bad. I bolted out of the door and into the kitchen as fast as I could. My sister was already there, and her and my parents were standing very close. My mom looked like she was on the verge of panic when she motioned for me to come close. She wrapped her arms around my sister, and me and my dad were already dialing on the house phone. Then I noticed some glass on the floor. I asked what was wrong with me, but she didn't want to tell me. She said we needed to go outside right away. As we headed out of the front door, I heard my dad talking to a 911 operator and telling them that when we got home, he found our back sliding glass door shattered and objects strewn about the kitchen. We went to the neighbor's house and waited for the police to come. After a few minutes, my dad joined us. He seemed to be well shaken up, which was a new sight to me. The police arrived and searched the house extensively. It was a big scene with all our neighbors outside and flashing lights illuminating the entire street for hours, but they never found anybody in our house. Whoever had been there had come and gone. The thing that gets me is that nothing was stolen. Whoever it was didn't want any of our possessions. What they did was take our canned food out of the pantry and stack them into small pyramids on our kitchen counter. They also turned on the TV in the basement and moved a few random objects to different parts of the house. Very creepy. It was like an insane person had been in our home and did things for reasons that only made sense to him. As the police were finishing up and ready to leave, I heard one of them ask my mom a question. They talked quietly, and I'm sure they thought I didn't hear. I pretended not to be listening, but I heard everything. You see, we kept magnetized letters on our fridge. I think I had gotten them for a birthday present a few years before, and we used them to leave each other messages for fun sometimes. The cop was asking my mom if the message on there that night was done by any of us. It wasn't. I watched my mom turn pale when he told her what it said. It still makes my skin crawl to this very day. It said, "Always watching." The police didn't find any fingerprints. They said the intruder had to have been wearing gloves. For the next few days, my entire family was extremely uneasy. I was absolutely positive the intruder was still in the house somehow, and that there was a hidden place nobody knew about where he could hide and listen to us. I never shook the feeling that somebody was there, Within a few months, we decided to move. It was all just too scary for us to stay in that area. We moved to a house several miles away. We were never bothered again, but I do still think about it. Was it kids playing a prank? Was it some insane person that wanted to torment a random family? Or was it someone that truly had it out for us, and who really was always watching? Could it have been a neighbor or someone we knew? These questions still keep me up at night sometimes. This happened many years ago, but the hairs on my neck stand up sometimes when I'm alone at home, and I have to check the house to make sure no one is hiding. Case notes, creepy file number 26. So the fact that you all moved, exactly what I would have done. That message on the fridge is just creepy beyond words. It's one of those events where it's probably not supernatural at all, but yet, damn, that is just too spooky. Who would do that? It probably was someone that was mentally ill, but why the message? Did he think it was someone else's house? Maybe. And that it took a while for you to move means that it probably was someone just trying to terrify you, since he was never back, whoever it was. At any rate, I'm glad you and your family are okay, but that would be traumatic indeed. Case file number 660, written by Anonymous Big 22. Gold from the Ether. I'm 20, male. So to put into perspective, my girlfriend of 2 years, 19 female, lost her mother unexpectedly 6 months before she and I met. Her mother and her were very close. They were practically best friends. Now, it's New Year's Eve and we're headed to her best friend's house for a party. My girlfriend decides to wear one of the last things her mother gave to her before passing away, a pair of gold earrings. At some point throughout the night, she loses an earring, devastated. We all retrace our every step, and we do manage to find the backing to it, but no earring. It's now 24 hours later. I'm laying in her bed by myself with no clothes on, while she's in the shower. I'm reading a book when all of a sudden, the freaking earring gets dropped onto my bare chest out of nowhere. I look around, nobody else is in the room, nobody else is even in the house, just my girlfriend mindlessly showering in the room besides me. I do not have long hair, and I was not wearing a hat. Absolutely zero chance it would stick to me. Case file number 661, written by Oh no, I'm farting. This had no business being the correct answer. This happened about 3 years ago, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately because of just how weird and inexplicable it was. Quick background on Cash Cab. If you know what it is, you can skip this bit. Cash Cab was an unscripted game show in which unsuspecting New Yorkers would find themselves answering trivia questions in the back of a cab. Depending on how far they needed to go, the contestant would answer questions that got progressively harder as the ride went on. The name of the Cash Cab driver and host was Ben Bailey. My buddy came over during the weeknight while I was sitting on my couch watching old reruns of Cash Cab. He sat down to relax as we both tried to guess the answers to the trivia questions given throughout the show. A little while into one of the episodes, from what I can remember, I believe it was 2 or 3 men that got into the Cash Cab. These guys looked a little strung out and like they partied a bit. Me and my friend, having a fricked up sense of humor, proceeded to make jokes about how they were on their way to buy Oxycontin, prescription pain pills. The Oxycontin jokes proceeded for about a minute or two until a new question had come up. The host, Ben Bailey, asked a question regarding an old king of England. May have been a question about King Richard, but I can't remember. The men were given time to deliberate, during which time my buddy and I said something like, "Yeah, Ben, we're gonna go with our previous answer and say Oxycontin." Not even 5 seconds later, Ben Bailey exclaims, "Oxycontin is right!" My buddy was still laughing. It had gone right over his head, but I froze in my seat. I said, "Did you frickin' hear that?" And I proceeded to rewind. I played it back for him just to make sure I wasn't crazy, and sure enough he repeated, "Oxycontin is right!" I still, to this day, have no explanation. It had absolutely nothing to do with the question asked, and there was no reason for him to say that at all. The episode is out there and you can try to find it if you want to confirm. I have not been able to find the episode since, but I also haven't looked too hard. The jokes were regarding Oxycontin, not Percocets. If anyone could help find the episode or point me in the direction of full Cash Cab episodes, I would greatly appreciate it. Case file number 662, written by Oni DiMaggio, When Death and Glitches Fuse Together. This happened about 3 weeks ago. I had the day off work and my cousin Harold asked if I could drive him to pick up new tires for his truck. They were being sold in a town just over an hour away, and basically it was a 2-lane country highway straight shot all the way there. About halfway there, he points and says, "Hey, look at that house over there. It has vultures all over it. I've never seen that before." Sure enough, on the left side of the road was an old 2-story country farmhouse with 7 to 8 vultures sitting on the roof. There were another 3 or 4 circling the property overhead. Immediately, I blurted out that maybe they smell something dead inside and were just stared as we drove by. Anyway, we got his tires and it slipped from our mind. On the way back, we had the windows on the truck down when suddenly we got a good whiff of rotting flesh, and sure enough, we were passing by that house again, but we didn't stop and we went home. I couldn't stop thinking about it and I called Harold to tell him so. He said he couldn't even sleep as it was bugging him too. I proposed that the right thing to do was to go back to the house, get the address, and call it in to the police for a welfare check. What if someone else was dead inside? What if they had a family? He agreed and we immediately set off. Here's the problem though. We couldn't locate the house. We drove all the way to that town where we got the tires, then turned around and we couldn't find it on the way back either. It's the same road. It was like the house ceased to exist. There was no house, no vultures, and no smell of death that matched what we saw the previous day. We even went out and did the same thing the next day, with no luck. But now, the more I think about it, what we saw made no sense. Although it was a country highway, there still had to be thousands of cars and trucks on it every day, not to mention police patrols. Surely one of those would have noticed a creepy old farmhouse with a crap ton of vultures on it and put 2 and 2 together. I still can't explain it. And it still bothers me and my cousin.
Well, hi there. I figured I'd give my case notes outside. It's a beautiful day, and I've never been on video before, so we'll just test this out, see if you like it. This is a big old Ben who just doesn't want to give me time to record, Ben. I'm working here. Hey. Yeah, okay. Okay, Ben. Yeah, I like you too. Now, give me a second, okay? So regarding case file 662, when you look at vultures, they have great sense of smell and they can know when someone has died. So that you saw vultures around the house and then the house disappeared, was that an omen in your own life? I don't know if anyone in your life has passed away. To me, it sounds more like a perception glitch than a house actually being there and then vanishing. Actually, curiously enough, there was another glitch where there was an entire mansion that vanished, but it was only one person that saw it. In this case, it's 2 people. So maybe something in the area itself was causing a hallucination as a group. Mass hallucinations do happen quite often in history, which is peculiar. But what could induce it? As you say, it's a highway or a freeway where thousands of people a day go by. So if it happened to you, it would happen to a whole bunch of people. Maybe a whole bunch of people actually did see a similar mansion with vultures around it. Maybe not everyone saw the same thing though. My gut says it's either a perception glitch or you were perceiving into another reality where there was a house there and someone had died in it. It just wasn't in this universe. You were just perceiving through it. The reason why is unclear. There's some environmental factor, I'm sure, but I also think it depends on the person's brain. Your brain has to be wired a certain way where you're perceiving it. I don't know if that's genetic or environment, but either way, I've never seen anything like it. All of my life has been pretty damn normal. But yeah, that's it. Let me know if you like these glitches where I'm on camera.
Creepy file number 27, written by OK Narwhal 465. The white van on my road. So this was about 3 years ago, and it still creeps me out. I was 18, female, at the time. I'm now 21. I was walking home from work at the local pizza joint, and took my usual route home. It was about 9:45 to 10:15 p.m., and it was super dark. As I'm getting about 100 yards away from the street I live on, a white van turns onto that street. Something didn't sit right with me, so I yanked out my earbuds and paused my music. I then turned down my street, and as I got closer to my house, I started getting a weird gut feeling. I looked up from my phone as I was about to text my roommate, who was out of town at the time, that I was almost home, about 15 yards or so. As I look up, I notice the white van sitting in front of my house, and the man inside is just staring at me, the yellow car light shining on his face. He had brown hair, glasses, and facial hair. His van lights were off, but his car was still running. I stopped and put my back to a tree in my neighbor's yard and just stood there, maintaining eye contact with this man. After about what seemed like eternity, probably like 5 minutes minimum, he starts driving towards the stop sign at the end of the road. I didn't put my back to him. I kept my back to the tree and maintained a visual on the van the entire time until it stopped at the stop sign. He just sat there for probably 2 to 3 minutes, all while I'm not looking away and while my back is still on the tree. Finally, he turned right, the direction in which I had come from, and after about 20 seconds of making sure he or anybody else wasn't coming, I bolt to my house. I quickly get inside and lock the door. I go to the window and very quietly look through the blinds. I didn't turn on any lights because I'm not stupid. After a few seconds of looking, he drove back up and down the street and left again. Afterwards, I texted my roommate what happened, and then went to each and every one of the windows in my house to make sure they were locked along with the back door and garage door, and made sure to keep all lights off for the remainder of the night. I didn't sleep a lick that night. I was so paranoid at every sound or movement. Let's just say I never walked home after that. Case file number 663, written by Konosu, the Green Jacket. This occurrence happened about, I'd say, 6 to 7 months ago while I was heading home from a family vacation. We stopped at a rest area somewhere in Alabama to let our dogs out and to head to the bathroom ourselves, and I was left in charge of the dogs while everyone else went in. So when my turn came around, I walked/ran in pretty fast. This is when I first spotted the disappearing man. He was this older guy with a cane, and the only reason I noticed him was because of the bright green jacket he had on. Well, I walked past him while he was on a bench, and I turned around because the green had caught my eye, and he was gone. Sure, he could have gotten up fast. Maybe he was just a fast old dude I didn't know. So I headed in and used the bathroom. So when I finished in the bathroom, I'm walking out and see the same guy walking in front of me out of the doors. I look down at my phone, and when I look up, the guy is gone again. I sped up and looked out the doors left and right to see if I could spot him, but he was completely gone out of nowhere. One of the weirdest experiences I've had, really. It may not seem like much, but it was quite odd. Case file number 664, written by True Gamer 1995, of Mercurial memory. This weekend, I recently moved back into my childhood town with my girlfriend. We are very happy about the move, and I called my dad to tell him we are fully moved in. We start to reminisce about the 15 years of memories we had in the town and the different apartments we lived in the town over the years. Both me and my dad have crazy good memories of even the smallest things. As we kept talking about the different places, an odd, creepy moment happened. There was one apartment we only lived in for a year, and at first, he couldn't remember the apartment at all. As we kept talking about it, we figured out the creepy part. My dad remembers everything around the apartment and events that happened outside of it, but for some reason, we couldn't remember one thing in the apartment. Not any furniture or events in it at all. We literally remember the ugly dark green front door, complaining while carrying groceries up the 3 flights of stairs that had green rails that matched the door, and a bunch of other things, but nothing inside the apartment. It's almost like we stop existing once you enter the apartment. We actually remember the tour of the apartment and the brown bearded guy who showed us the place, and we remember shaking his hand and sealing the deal, but never what it looked like inside or anything happening in there. Has this happened to anyone else? How does this happen? Case file number 665, written by Juan Cloaked Stone. Hi, Jennifer. People, mostly people I barely know, but I have told my name to before, like patients at my job for example, always call me by the same wrong first name. Every single time someone gets my name wrong accidentally, like we're all called someone by the wrong name by accident, the name they call me is always Jennifer. Now I think everyone's first instinct here would be that it's just confirmation bias, and that I only just pay attention to it when the name they call me is Jennifer, and that I disregard the times they've called me by another name that isn't Jennifer. But I took this into account about 8 to 10 years ago and started to pay strict attention. I have never been called the wrong name that isn't Jennifer in this entire time frame. 10 years. To get some logical reasoning out of the way, my real name does not sound like Jennifer, nor does it start with a J or any other letter that can make the J sound in English or any other language that I'm aware of. This has happened in multiple different states, so that rules out that maybe there's just a girl who lives locally to me that's named Jennifer and we just happen to look really alike. Strangers that I don't know at all come up to me on the street mistaking me for a different person. It's always people who I've told my real name to at some point. Hell, even people who have known me for a short while but long enough to know better, I'm talking over the course of several months, have called me Jennifer. The freaking priest that married my ex and I, who we have known for a year and a half at that point, called me Jennifer when we got up to rehearsing the vow portion of the wedding ceremony on our rehearsal night, even though our names were written down in front of him. I freaked out that he might do the same thing during the actual ceremony the next day, but he didn't, thankfully. He called my ex by his correct name. I do not believe that I look like any celebrity that I know of named Jennifer, and I have never been told that I look like a celebrity named Jennifer. I have been told I look like other celebrities, but never Jennifer. I don't hang out with or work with anyone named Jennifer. Nobody I'm related to is named Jennifer. I have been called Jennifer by people of different genders, different races, different nationalities, different first languages spoken, and from different countries. My real name is a common one, so it's not hard to remember. The only thing I'm left to deduce is that it's just a huge coincidence that spanned at least a decade. So what do you make of this? Why does everyone mistake me for Jennifer?
So, case notes for file 665. This is a weird one. It's not often that there's really no clear solutions, nothing that's obvious. To be named Jennifer by everyone in your life for 10 years. You went through all the obvious solutions, where it's not some local thing, where people of a certain nationality or region or dialect or language just mistake you for a Jennifer for some reason. The only thing I can think of that makes any sense is that you just have one of those faces where you just look like a Jennifer. For instance, people say that I look like a James, maybe more formally Charles. My name is actually Paul, which does work as well. It's not my favorite name, although it's not terrible either. I think it's reasonable. And yeah, people have sometimes called me James when they didn't know my name, but never after the fact. So yours seems to be an extreme degree. Somehow people are just assuming maybe your aura is giving off this extreme vibe, conveying this absolute certainty in people that your name is Jennifer when it's not. But tell me, if it wasn't a hassle to change your name, what would you want to be called? And what's your first name if you want to share that information? I think I'll leave you all on a very inspiring quote that I read recently by the late and great Robin Williams. No matter what people tell you, words and ideas can absolutely change the world. I think it's part of what I'm trying to do, just spread ideas and stories about the world that seems so mundane, but it actually is fantastic, and we don't know everything about it yet. And that's part of the fun, to learn and explore and understand. Much more of that to do.
Bonus file, written by I'm a Sweet Little Angel, a Sanctuary of Doom. I was a jungle perch, JP, fishing at the Black Rocks waterfall in Mowbray, far north Queensland. To get to the waterfalls, you have to walk up the creek that eventually leads to the waterfalls. The walk is about 3 kilometers long. There is no set path you take, so you find yourself walking up on both creek sides or in the actual creek itself. Plenty of rock hopping and wading through the water that was chest deep. Going up was immaculate. Caught lots of fish, recharged myself from the stress of life. It was raining, and there was no one else for the whole day in the area, apart from one family that passed me because I took my time fishing each deeper pool for JP. The family had already made their way to the top, then left when I was still making my way up. So I was truly alone then. Once I had gotten to the main waterfall, I had a bit of a rest and relax there. All was well until I started getting an unnerving feeling that something or someone was watching me. I mostly brushed this off because you do tend to get these types of feelings being alone in the bush. After my rest, I started making my way down the creek. However, the feeling did not leave. It wasn't overwhelmingly strong, so I kept on brushing it off. I decided that I would only fish the main pools that I had some luck in on the way up. Also, you don't catch as many JP downstream due to them mostly looking upstream for prey. After walking about 300 meters from the main waterfall, I wasn't getting much luck, so I sat down on a flat spot and changed the lure on my rod. This is when it started to get very strange. As soon as I stood up, I had this unearthly smell fill my nostrils. It's something you can't describe. Personally, it felt more like an experience rather than a direct smell from something, if that makes sense. If I was going to compare it to a smell, it would be similar to really bad smelling sweat mixed with rotting fresh fruit and wet car carpet or dog. After half a second of smelling this, I instantly went into this very confused trance. I didn't know where I was, briefly, and felt very confused and lightheaded. I would say this lasted for about 4 to 5 seconds, but it could have been longer as I didn't really have a sense of time during it. I remembered snapping out of the trance I was in whilst looking at my rod. The instant I snapped out of it, I felt all the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Some people say this is a play on words or expression, but this feeling was different. My upper back and neck went extremely tingly, and I could literally feel my neck hairs stand up. This was paired with the most intense, get the hell out of there feeling I have ever experienced. It wasn't just an instinctive, horrible feeling. It was pure doom, like all the fear in the world was projected into me in one single shot. I knew instantly that whatever did that did not want me there, and I knew that in my whole entire being. I was so convinced something was there that I verbally apologized for being there and said I was leaving. The trouble was, it was 2.7 kilometers back to my car, and moving downstream is a lot harder than upstream, so it was a very long, painful, and paranoid walk back. The whole way, it felt like someone or something was following and watching me. I thought I heard a scream or screech on 2 occasions, but it was so hard to tell with the loud gushing water. With each step I moved away from the initial spot that the experience happened in, that feeling would subside a bit. I was about 3/4 of the way back to the car, and I gained enough courage and curiosity to see if I could maybe communicate with whatever it was, or at least catch a glimpse of what was there. I stopped, turned around, and was about to walk back upstream, literally about to take my first step, when the feeling of intense doom punched me in the face again, but with only about 1/4 of the strength from the first time. It was like it was warning me again not to come back. With that, I accepted my fate and made my way back to the car, still shaken from what had just happened. As I was walking on the off-road back to the car, the owner of the nearby property was near the entrance and was about to mow his lawn. I stopped for a chat and asked him if he had had any weird experiences around the area. He looked at me with a cheeky smile and blatantly said, I wasn't the only one that has had an experience like that here. He said that around 5 times a year, he will be stopped by a shaken tourist or a local that has just soiled their jocks. He said around the same time last year, a couple had a very similar experience to mine. He seems to think it's around the wet season when there aren't many people on the track. He mentioned that night that he had heard what he thought were pigs screaming around his yard. Said it didn't sound like a pig, but that's what he logically thought it was. Then, as he went to check for any crop or ground destruction from them in the morning, there was nothing. He also had moments when the curlews would be going off their nutters screaming, then all the birds would fly away from the trees, then just eerie silence. He also mentioned there have been many yowie, Australian Bigfoot, sightings around that area. I later found out from an Aboriginal elder living in the Mowbray area that was sacred land to the Aboriginal people, and men were not meant to go there as it was a birthing place for women. After my experience, I had to sit in my car and collect my thoughts on what just happened. Away from the area, of course. Thinking about going back with a mate in the near future. Case file number 666, written by Matt Cat, Speaking Money into Existence. This is a bundled triple story from our very own listener, Matt Cat, The Kinetic Kitchen. I'm in my kitchen eating dinner listening to Kinetic Symphony on YouTube, who covers Glitch in the Matrix stories. At one point, as I'm munching down on some zucchini slices, I get the most intense feeling of déjà vu ever. I'm physically getting goosebumps now as I type this out. Background context. I had just been telling people all day about quantum immortality, which I quite literally learned from listening to Kinetic Symphony. And now I think I'm a time hopper and I had died from a severe eating disorder, either early 2022 or late 2021. So as I feel this déjà vu, I think, wow, déjà vu as I listen to Glitch in the Matrix stories, and I've been telling the homies about quantum immortality all day, and laughed it off as nothing. Not even 5 seconds later, I hear Kinetic Symphony say, a man's voice in the same kitchen, but in a different universe. So me, 25-year-old man, experiencing déjà vu in my kitchen, but in a different universe? Oh my goodness, I was beyond spooked, and even commented on my experience on the video, to which Kinetic Symphony replied, symmetry in thought. It sends a chill down your spine, doesn't it? In a good way, as I felt goosebumps down my spine. Okay, now I'm even more spooked. The famous, debatable, Kinetic Symphony replies to me on my first comment ever about the déjà vu and then speaks the chill down my spine into existence. Not sure what went on here, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Ear biscuits, folded chips. I was orthorexic by choice, which means to focus solely on a diet pertaining to healthy foods, clean eating. And I live a very active and physical lifestyle. I'm a skateboarder, get roughly 10,000 steps a day, and I strength train to build muscle. I started a clean bulk, which is to increase my calorie intake in order to put on weight, which in turn puts on muscle as long as I get sufficient protein and healthy fats. So I started eating some fun foods for the first time in around 5 years. I had just opened a bag of Kettle Chips Parmesan garlic potato chips, as I wanted a nice crunch with my meal. I love the folded chips. They're extra crunchy and for some reason always packed with the most flavor and seasoning. For the first time eating chips in many years, opting for the folded ones, I'm watching an episode of Rhett and Link's podcast, Ear Biscuits, on YouTube. As I'm eating the folded chips, they literally start talking about folded potato chips and how they're the best ones. Link talks about how the folded chips are the best for a good minute as I'm chomping on the folded potato chips myself. This cannot be summed up by mere coincidence, as this happened after so many glitches, coincidences, and déjà vu moments. This world is a simulation, and I really think that whatever I do for some reason, it resonates in other forms. Movies I see for the first time, podcasts or videos I'm listening to for the first time, etc. Speaking money into existence. This is pure manifestation at its finest, and can only be explained as such. Okay, so following all these crazy coincidences and manifesting thoughts into reality, I decided to do an experiment to see if it was truly a simulation and matrix situation. I said out loud, I am going to find a large sum of money, randomly on the ground. Not 2 days later, I was planning on just having a rest day and staying home all day. However, I needed to go to the store for some items I needed. I parked my car and thought, I guess I'll go up these stairs, which is odd because I haven't walked up these stairs in a good 8 months. When I get to the top of the stairs, I find a wad of cash. I picked it up and put it in my pocket without counting it. On the drive home, I laughed and spoke out loud. Watch, there'll just be a $100 bill nestled in the middle, and laughed about it. I had only seen $1 bills on the outside of the wad. I get home, and sitting in the middle is a $100 bill, followed by 4 20s, 10 ones, and a $5 bill. I literally and physically manifested $195 straight cash into my reality. This is definitely a simulation, and I have the ability to manifest anything I want. Is it a blessing, a curse, or just symmetry in thought? Definitely sends a chill down my spine, but in a good way. Case notes for file 666. So I do remember replying to your comment.
But I didn't really know how intense this was for you. It was just a comment I was reading that didn't have as much context, obviously, as an entire story like this. Regarding the first story where you were listening to me in your kitchen, the Kinetic kitchen, I'm not sure how you would have died. It's not impossible. Obviously, we're really fragile as human beings. We can die so easily. We can have random strokes, and even if you're perfectly healthy, you could just have a blood clot in your head, and 1 second you're fine, no symptoms, perfectly healthy, go to the doctor, clean bill of health, next second, just dead. It's not fair, and it doesn't happen that often, but it can happen. And maybe, well, you said you were eating zucchini slices, so maybe you were eating a zucchini slice, and you choked on it and died. Just like that. Of course, if quantum immortality is real, this all balances out. Our fragility is fine because we can die, but we just transpose ourselves to another us in a different universe of which there's nearly infinite. So it's fine. No worries. It is very sad for the people there that don't realize that quantum immortality is a thing. They just think you died and that's it. The end of your story. Or maybe you went to heaven or something like that. But yeah. At least you live on, if that is what happened. I don't know. It might just be a coincidence. And the same thing for you listening to Rhett and Link's podcast and eating kettle chips and they're talking about it. You know, coincidences do happen. So I don't know if you're manifesting, maybe subconsciously willing yourself to be exposed to these coincidences. And there is something to say there, because some people experience more coincidences than others. Are they merely perceiving them more often, or are they actually manifesting their will, subconsciously or consciously, into the universe, so that their minds are guided along a pathway of sorts? Sort of like a guided experience in a game versus unguided. You can ask the universe for not visual hints, but sort of a inclination on where to go and how to do things, if you want to wind up to a certain position. And that's exactly what I think happened with the third glitch, where you manifested money into the universe. I'm not sure you actually physically created money. I don't think that's possible. The amount of energy required to create mass from energy is mind-boggling. So what probably happened is someone in the universe went to that place and they dropped money, and the universe is aware of this information. If we want to attribute it to being a simulation, well, it's just data. Data stored on a server partition in the real world. So then you're in the real world and a developer sees this request by you to manifest money. Well, they can't create it. That would violate the laws they're given by the game, but they can lead you towards it. So maybe there's instincts in you, influences, that led you to make decisions where you wound up exactly where you needed to be to pick up that money. And to you, it just feels like, oh wow, I created this money from nothing. But instead, you were just guided along a path that led you to it. When I tried to bike from Florida to North Carolina, I only made it one day, and I was trying desperately to find somewhere to sleep. And I was just saying, it was all in the back of my mind, but it was part of my thoughts, you know. I guess some of it was bleeding into my consciousness. And eventually I just find out, okay, I'm never going to find a place, everything here is owned, it's private property, I'm never going to find a place to sleep. And then eventually, just as I was thinking this, there was a path up ahead that curved, I followed it, and voila, there was an empty spot, no one around, wasn't private property, no markings, so I just managed to find a place to sleep, which was nice, because I was tired. So yeah, I think we can manifest our will into the universe, and what really that just means is asking the universe for guidance. Sort of like going into story mode for a game. I like that idea, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. Those are my thoughts, and thank you for sharing the stories with us.
Case file number 667, written by Yeo Manticore, Crossing the Threshold of Time. I actually don't know where to post this. I am browsing the internet with random Google searches like Superman is too slow for Goku, or something like Superman is not a skilled martial artist, or any debate about how weak and inconsistent Superman's abilities, feats, and skills are, because I find him way too boring to begin with. Around 7:53 AM, GMT plus 8, I do these random searches before I play Gwent Mobile at 8 sharp. Last time I checked, the time was around 7:58 AM, I finished a random Quora post about the aforementioned topic, and when I checked the time again, it was 7:43 a.m. I had a miniature heart attack. I ran downstairs to check the living room clock. It's also 7:43 a.m. I asked my sister the time on her phone. It's 7:44 a.m. Okay, I'm just freaking out now. The laws of reality have been disrupted. I don't trust clocks now. I have never set the time on my phone since it's using auto-default international time, Manila time. I'm not sure what happened. I'm not high nor drunk. I've never been high or drunk for 5 years ever since college, and I'm pretty sure that the time I started browsing was 7:53 a.m. I'm pretty tight on time due to my work schedule. I just finished my night shift at 6:30 a.m. and arrived at home at 7 a.m. Exposure to science fiction ideas is scaring me that I have crossed some sort of threshold and the timeline has been disrupted. If it is, hopefully for the better, like an end to the war or climate change or something. I hope so. Bonus file, written by Majestic Anybody 2025. The Visitor in All Black. I, 23 female, have been a geriatric nurse for 2.5 years now, and I experience a lot of death and dying. One thing I have surprisingly never experienced is paranormal activity or spirits. My father has worked with the Paranormal Research Society and has been on numerous paranormal research projects over the years. I've heard crazy amounts of stories throughout my lifetime, but I'm a see it to believe it kind of gal. I have always been a skeptic when my father talked about actually seeing spirits and apparitions. With that being said, I have never seen anything that I could call concrete evidence of something paranormal, but today forever changed my life and my reality. Today I was standing in front of a medication administration cart, preparing my medications, when one of my nurse's aides came to report that one of my patients, who was actively dying, had a family member in the room on the floor. My first thought was, they do not have enough chairs in the room. I will complete my current task and then go address this. I took the medications I had prepared for the appropriate patient. The appropriate patient's room just happened to be directly across the hall from said patient's room, with the family member on the floor. As I'm walking by, I glance in the actively dying patient's room to observe this family member on the floor. I see, from the knee down, 2 legs dressed in black slacks and all black leather shoes, lying flat on the floor, face down. These legs seem to be lying parallel to the bed where my dying patient was lying and were sticking out from the end of the bed frame. I glimpsed over, noticed this, and went into the room across the hall to give the medications to the appropriate patient, as I did not want them to be misplaced. I was in the room for an estimated 30 to 45 seconds before exiting and walking across the hall. When I entered the room again of the actively dying patient, the legs were gone. No one was on the floor. The patient's family member was sitting in a chair at the bedside, with clothes on that do not resemble the ones seen on the legs I had seen before. I immediately asked this family member if they had been on the floor. The family member stated, no one has been in here except me. I did a room search and did not see anyone else in the room either. The other visiting family members were outside during this and also did not have clothes that resembled the ones I had just seen on the legs of whatever entity was in here. I spent all afternoon trying to find someone with black pants and black leather shoes. No one turned up, and I still cannot find a way to justify what I saw. Keep in mind, the nurse's aide saw exactly what I saw too and described the same feet, in the same position. Also, the family member that was in the room did not observe what my nurse's aide and I observed. Has anyone on here had a similar experience? Case file number 668, written by Hidden Anomaly. The Kiss of Light. A few years ago, I had to spend the holidays by myself. On holidays Eve, I received a phone call from a long-distance relative and thought it was a last-minute invitation. When I realized it was only a polite, happy holidays phone call, I became very sad and felt a sharp, sore throat, the one you get when you're eager to cry. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, and when I hung up the phone, I just lay down and started crying non-stop. It was about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and at one point I probably fell asleep while my feet were on the floor and my back was on the bed. I wasn't tired at all and did not intend to sleep or anything. I don't even remember falling asleep. Suddenly, I felt a very gentle touch over my forehead. It felt like someone's fingers pulling my hair aside, and then it felt like a gentle kiss over my forehead. I opened my eyes. My head was facing the door, and I could see the living room window. It was a very small apartment. A strong morning light burst from the window, the kind of light you normally see at 10 o'clock in the morning. I remember thinking to myself, I can't believe I slept that long, not to mention in that certain position. I stretched a bit, got up, and noticed my room was actually dark. Outside was dark, and my phone showed it was after midnight. Case file number 669, written by I Am Blin. Rewind the clock. Question. So I'm kind of reluctant to ask this question, but it has been a mystery that has baffled me for 13 years. So here I go. When I was 21 years old, I lived in my mom's guest house in her backyard. One night we got into a horrible fight, one of the worst fights we've ever had. When she went back to her own side of the yard, I closed the doors to my guest house and locked them, shut all the lights off, and laid down to go to sleep. About an hour later, I got a phone call from her, and she asked me what I was doing. I told her I was sleeping. "No, you're not." I said, "Yeah, I am." She said, "Prove it then. Walk out the front door, come across the yard and meet me in my kitchen, but stay on the phone with me." So this is what I did. When I walked into her house and into her kitchen, she was staring out her kitchen window across the yard at the side door of my guest house. She told me to come over to where she was standing and look out the window and tell her what I saw. I looked out the window and I saw myself. It wasn't a current version of me though. It was my senior year of high school. I knew this because my hair was done the exact same way that I used to do it back then, and I was wearing my favorite shirt and matching shoes that I used to have back then as well. I was sitting on a chair that I actually did have sitting outside the door of my current house in the side yard. I was talking to people that were not there. We saw nobody else, and I was smoking a cigarette. I also used to smoke back then. I had my legs crossed, and I was laughing and having a good time. I also kept looking over at the window where my mom and my actual self were standing inside her kitchen. I believe it was around 1 a.m., so it was very dark outside. Nobody could have seen us standing inside her house in the dark, so that too was very weird. That version of me kept looking over at the window, almost as if she, or I, knew we were there. This has baffled my mom and I for a very long time. I have never been able to find anything on Google that is even remotely close to what I'm talking about. The only thing that I have seen through my research is information about doppelgangers. I know the difference. I am aware of what a doppelganger is, and this was something entirely different than that. Can somebody else who is spiritual and enlightened please tell me what the hell that was? Thank you in advance. Case file number 670, written by I Am Poom. When your car talks back to you. I've had many unexplainable occurrences throughout my life, but a couple weeks ago I had my very first glitch in the Matrix type event. What makes this one so amazing is that my husband was there for the whole thing, otherwise I might have written it off as my lizard brain deceiving me once again. My husband is a car guy, and he is very anal about how he operates his cars. He has all these little gadgets and doodads, rotary dirters and what have you. So when he starts his car, he turns the key forward and lets all the electrical stuff start up before fully turning the key to start the engine. It probably only takes 4 seconds total, and yes, this is important. So we hop in the car one warm Saturday morning to go get all the goods for a giant breakfast feast. As he's turning the key over in this slow, weird way, he says out loud, "Did I bring my sunglasses?" And without skipping a beat, his car, in her car voice, says, "You did." Just like she was answering his question. We both just looked at each other in shock for a second before confirming that we each heard the same thing. He looked down and saw his sunglasses sitting in the cup holder, so she was right too. By then we had fully started the engine, but his phone had no time to connect, and why would it answer his question anyways? His car has buttons on the steering wheel that make it speak, so he pressed the button and sure enough, that's his car's voice. My husband is a no-nonsense military man who doesn't like to think or talk about these types of things. We have had paranormal experiences that forced him to acknowledge that this stuff happens, but he would rather pretend it doesn't exist. I'm sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, and I was super excited about the whole thing. Creepy File number 28, written by Queer Fox. The chill of an attempted break-in. A little background. I'm 29 non-binary, partially deaf, and have terrible anxiety. See PTSD. My roommate, 27 female, has a beautiful American bully. He's a bit skittish due to an abusive background, but he's overall a good dog. I have a super comfy couch that I often choose to sleep on over my own bed. The dog, let's call him Rover, barks anytime he hears someone near the door or knocks. It can be annoying, but it's helpful because often I don't hear it. This night, Rover stayed downstairs with me because I was anxious, but too lazy to go upstairs into my room. We have a deadbolt that has a keypad and auto locks after 30 seconds. It's about 2 a.m. and I wake up to him growling. Now, I've heard him growl before when delivery people came by and whatnot, but it was almost primal. I open my eyes and roll over to see Rover standing between the end of the couch and our front door, hair standing on end and hunched over like a wolf about to take down a deer. Then I heard it. Someone was banging on the apartment door about 3 houses down. I was absolutely frozen with fear. I felt the blood leave my face and my instincts were screaming at me to run. This wasn't a "let me in, I forgot my keys." It was more frantic. I had the window open about 2 inches, but used the lock on the bottom to keep it from opening more. I could hear this person mumbling to themselves and shuffling their feet around. Then I heard the chirping of my keypad being used. It was rhythmic, so they were definitely trying actual codes and not just randomly punching buttons. At this point, River had backed up and placed himself directly in front of me, still facing the door. Then the doorknob started to move. Thankfully, they never entered the correct code, so it was still locked. That's when Rover went into a full frenzy. He rushed the door, body slamming it while barking and growling. I've never heard a dog make such a noise. I heard the person stumble back, pause, then giggle. That's what scared me the most. It was like I had been submerged in ice water. I had goosebumps and felt sick. At this point, my roommate had woken up and rushed down the stairs. She saw me frozen on the couch and River trying to bust down our metal door to get at whoever was trying to get in. She broke the silence and screamed, "My husband is a cop! We are armed and I will shoot!" Total lie, but it seemed to work as we heard footsteps running away and River clicked back to his normal doofus self. I never sleep again with the window open downstairs, and I've yet to sleep on my couch since. Case notes, Creepy File number 28. So quick story about me. When I was in Florida, about 12 years ago now, it's a long story on why I was there, why I had to leave my home. But when I was there, I ended up working at a Humane Society kennel. About 7 months there, something like that. Yeah, 7-8 months. What I noticed was there were a lot of pit bulls that were brought in. You'd be surprised how many people just abandon their dogs at the side of the road, or they bring them to the kennel, but they don't even bring them inside. They just left them chained to the fence outside. I guess they're embarrassed. I don't know. Anyways, there were a lot of pit bulls there, and they were all very friendly. None of them were aggressive, which I didn't expect. The entire 7 to 8 months I was working there, I never had a single incident with any of them that were aggressive. Actually, the most aggressive dogs were the tiny chihuahuas. Compensating, I don't know. And I know that American bullies aren't pit bulls, they're crossbred. And all I can say is that I'm really glad that your bully was extremely protective. I'm sure it did dissuade the potential invader, a little bit at least. Although your roommate's bluff is what seems to have really sold his fear enough to run away. What really creeped me out about this story is when he started to giggle. Now that's just creepy. Why would someone giggle? Especially when there's a giant bully charging at the metal frame door that he can't break into. I would definitely advise most people get some sort of defense system because yeah, some people are crazy. Maybe he was high on illegal substances. That's the only thing I can think of that makes sense besides actual psychosis and insanity, which is also possible. You never know when you're dealing with people. So be careful and stay defended. Case file number 671, written by Nip Nobles. The Toddler Popsicle. So today I was in my kitchen. I live in a small loft, and the smallest bedroom is like 3 feet from the edge of the island counter in my kitchen. I saw my 2-year-old walk down from the hallway, where I had last seen her, and into my daughter's room. I literally watched her for several seconds as she walked in my line of sight, into the room, and out of my line of sight. Something seemed off though, but I was distracted with my task, so I just immediately told my 13-year-old, "Hey, Toddler in your room," so she could check it out. 13 was in the living room, which is joined to the kitchen area, so it didn't take but 20 seconds for her to get into her bedroom. She was like, Toddler isn't here. So we checked together and she, Toddler, was still in her little bed that's in my room at the end of the hall, just vibing. Then it hit me. What was wrong? Toddler was wearing a pink, footless, zip-up sleeper today. When I saw her, she was wearing a teal-blue sleeper with Popsicle print that she wears often. Being distracted, it didn't really click, but in my subconscious. Also, weirdly enough, she's a heavy walker, and when I saw her a minute before, she made no sound, which is probably why I noticed something off. She also seemed like her being was slightly muted color-wise, and it seemed like a soft image, almost normal, but slightly faded like a camera filter. Enough for me to notice something was weird, but not instantly notice what whilst I was distracted. This was broad daylight, by the way. I wasn't seeing things wrong. I even saw her smile a little. I saw her clearly, but it wasn't her. I've got no idea what to do with this. I have no history of hallucinations or anything like that. I'm not having a mental break, nor am I sleep deprived. Everything else is mostly normal. However, this event did remind me that 3 or so weeks ago, when my 13-year-old was home alone, she heard my toddler giggling in my living room, even though we weren't home. Not many kids live in my building, but a few do, so I brushed it off as her mistaking someone in the hall for my kiddo. Now, I'm not so sure. Case file number 672, written by Saima, the feel-through bodysuit. This happened in February 2022. I was on a first date with someone I met online. It was my first time meeting someone in person through online dating, so I went to the mall earlier in the day to look for a new top to wear with some jeans. I found a cream-colored fitted turtleneck made of 96% cotton and 4% elastane. I wore it with high-waisted fitted jeans, but when I would sit, the turtleneck rode up about 1 inch up my back, and I did not feel comfortable exposing skin since it was cold out and a first date. So I wore a black bodysuit underneath, which was securely tucked in, and added another layer under the turtleneck. We had finished dinner, neither of us drank alcohol, and decided to stop at a cafe that was open late at night. We were chatting for a bit and getting a little flirty. I was sitting to his left. He asked if he could put his arm around me, and I said yes. He put his left arm around my back, slightly under my left armpit. His hand rested on the left side area under my left boob. He applied a slight pressure with his fingers, and I felt the distinct and jarring sensation of cold fingers directly on my skin. I immediately questioned if there was a hole in my shirt in my head. How could that happen? I had just bought that shirt 4 hours ago, $50 and in good quality, and was wearing a full bodysuit beneath it. A millisecond after I had this thought, he abruptly retreated his hand and asked if I had a hole in my shirt because he definitely felt my skin. I said no, and told him I had questioned the same thing as well as I felt his cold fingers against my skin. We inspected the shirt and found nothing. He asked if maybe he lifted the shirt and I said no, I would have felt that. Plus I had a bodysuit on underneath. When I got home, I removed the turtleneck and bodysuit and found 0 holes in the fabric. I probably would have chalked it up to something in my head if he hadn't experienced the same sensation as well. Bonus file, written by Direct Mulberry 3814, a most friendly of hauntings. For some backstory context, my once-in-a-lifetime best friend, late 20s, moved into my house last year with most of her things after a bad divorce. She recently passed away unexpectedly and tragically after an accident at work. It was especially devastating since she had just finally become a genuinely happy person again in recent weeks. After struggling with depression and the implications of her divorce, she could light up any room she entered, and she was the most charismatic, kind person you ever met. I was obviously a wreck after she passed, and I was left to deal with all of her belongings. Her family lives out of the country and couldn't come to get her things due to restrictions. But my work schedule was demanding, and I had to maintain my routine the best I could. I'm not a spiritual or superstitious person, but she was. Things started getting weird about a week after her death. The first bizarre thing I noticed was that I began having out-of-body dream experiences about her. I have never been able to recall my dreams or even dreams at all, but these were so real and I remember every detail I'm feeling. So real that I would wake up crying. I convinced myself that this was most likely due to grief and was probably normal. After about a week after she passed, I would be jolted awake routinely at around 2 or 3 in the morning. I swear to God, I heard footsteps going down the hallway to her room, her door open and closed. I have 2 well-trained border collies that sleep with me, and they would literally crawl out of their skin barking like an intruder was in the house, tilt their head at the sound of the footsteps, and stare nervously at the door. This is completely out of character for my dogs, and they have never done this in their 5 years on the earth. I would get up and check the house and nothing would be there. I have lived alone in the house for 2 years prior, with nothing out of the ordinary happening. And my house is new construction, so nothing creaks, there's no drafts, no weird noises, plumbing, etc. This went on like clockwork for weeks after her death. Now the really peculiar things start to happen when I return to work. Our routine prior to her passing was that I had to leave for work at around 5 to 6 a.m., and she generally didn't have to work until 9 or 10 a.m. She would hang out with my dogs after I left, and they would often crawl into her bed with her in her room. After she passed, I shut her bedroom door and never opened it. It was too painful for me to look at her things and her empty room. My first day back at work, I left my dogs in the house like usual. When I returned home, I was instantly panicked because my dogs did not greet me and there was no sign of them. I looked everywhere and called for them. I hear a scratch coming from the other side of her door. My dogs were locked in her room. It was unsettling, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I investigated every logical explanation, but there was no way the AC or something could have opened and closed the door. Has never happened to any door in that house. And my dogs are smart, but not that smart. The next morning before leaving, I shut her door as hard as I could and placed a heavy wood chair in front of it. When I came home, my dogs again were nowhere to be found, and the chair was slid at least 10 feet down the hall in a straight line upright. I let my dogs out of the room for the second time and had chills shoot throughout my body. I was freaked out. This only happened a handful of other times in the coming weeks. It's been roughly 6 months since her death, and things have settled down for the most part. I still hear footsteps at night, and my dogs still occasionally exhibit odd behavior, especially by her room. We had an ongoing battle about the thermostat she liked in the house, at around 73 degrees, and I always have it set at 68. My thermostat now will sometimes be set at 73 when I get home, and I'll be able to smell her cleaning supplies. She used totally different products, and she was a neat freak who always was cleaning when I came home. Obviously, this isn't a malicious haunting. It actually started to help me cope with her death. Thanks for listening to my ramblings. Has anyone else experienced something similar after losing someone? Is there a way to communicate with her? I feel like she left before her time and has a lot of unfinished business. Case notes, bonus file. A mostly peaceful haunting. So the first thing I want to say is that I'm very sorry for your loss. I can't even imagine losing a friend at 20, a best friend, to die that young. I don't know how they died on the job. If it was some sort of chemical poisoning or something fell on them, all I can say is that I really hope it was very quick and painless. Moving on to the haunting, well, calling it a haunting is a bit extreme. I think it's the imprint of your friend, but it's not really them. I'll get into that more later. For now, I'll say that yes, I fully believe that the imprint of your friend is there. Most notable as evidence is the fact that your dogs can perceive her, even though you can't physically see her, hearing her footsteps, and they react so wildly because their best friend is back in their minds, in their perception. Maybe they even smell her too. And then them getting into the room, that was shut the first time, and then the second time you made efforts to make sure they couldn't get in, but they still did. That doesn't just happen. Clearly, the imprint of your friend was there and let them in. And one thing I wanted to mention, I fully believe in quantum immortality, but how do you square that with ghosts and imprints? I think there are 2 possible avenues there. The first one is that we are only left behind as an imprint if there are no other alternate universes to go to, if we're dead in every single one of them. This isn't very likely in my opinion because there are so many alternate universes. Every time there's a branching pathway, where even one atom could go a certain way towards another way, or some form of energy wave could function in one way, oscillate a different way, any slight deviation spawns a new universe in the multiverse theory. So because of that, there's almost infinite numbers of universes. There's more universes than we could write on every single atom in the universe, because every atom can spawn many, many, many times more universes than itself. So it's not infinite, but it might as well be, per our conception of it. So the second possibility, to square this, is that what's left behind is more of an autopilot NPC. It's not really them. It's not them in their full sentience and consciousness. They're off somewhere else, doing their thing, without even probably realizing that they died. Though sometimes we do realize that we died. And that's my working theory, is that these are real, they're spirits, they're entities, they're forces of energy that are left behind, and they evoke personalities and are drawn to specific things that the person that was imprinted was like. So, similar, drawn to your pets, drawn to the room where she was in, or setting the thermostat at 73. But these are autopilot features. Sort of just an imprint of who they were that's baked into the universe in that specific area. Would make sense too why ghosts as we perceive them tend to be stuck to one area or an object, and they don't navigate far from there because that's not where they were. Sort of like when you walk in the forest many times in the same area, it'll form a path. You're compressing the grass and dragging up dirt and everything. I think through our lives we form a path through the universe, and those areas have our energy, and we're tethered to them if we die. But I think the consciousness of your friend is in another universe, living a normal life and probably very happy. I would hope so. Case file number 673, written by StarCraft 1160, The Grid in the Sky. A couple years ago, I believe, maybe it was early last year, I was riding in the passenger seat of my car while my boyfriend drove. It was mid-morning, sunny, and not a cloud in the sky. Then it appeared. A grid suddenly appeared above my windshield. The best I can describe it is like a grid paper you'd use in math class, but all you could see were the multiple lines in black. Besides that, I could still see the sky and road around it. I even leaned forward in my seat to look up, and it went on just as far as I could see, like the world was in a grid paper. And just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. I'm going to say it stayed for maybe 3 to 5 seconds tops. I asked my boyfriend if he saw it, which he did not. Has anyone experienced anything like this? I think about it all the time since it happened. I can't explain it. Case notes for file 673, A Grid in the Sky. So this is the second grid story I've personally narrated, although I've read at least a dozen at this point. It's pretty common, although how common exactly is debatable. Still, I would say that it's one of those glitches that does reoccur quite often, enough that it's a pattern, and it shouldn't be dismissed. Now, it is interesting that your boyfriend didn't see it, while you did. So now this is another one of those glitches that is perception-based. Something in our minds has to be wired just right for us to be able to see this grid in the sky. It does strike as some sort of coordinate system, right? It would be a 2-coordinate system if it's a flat 2D plane. Still, it is an incomplete representation of our universe, which is in 3 dimensions as we perceive it. Well, 4 if you include time, but that's a side issue. In terms of physical location, where you could be in any given time, outside of time, it's 3 dimensions. So you would have a cube space grid instead of a flat plane that you'd see in the sky. Now, is this evidence of the simulation? I would chalk it up towards yes, even though it's an incomplete representation. It's not the full picture, and I don't know why some people are able to see it and others can't, but I would chalk this up as further evidence that we live in some sort of simulation, either as a video game or some sort of test. But this reality as we perceive it, let's just say that there's more to it than we can perceive easily. Let's go with that. Case file number 674, written by Shiny Pebble 77. Right or left? This happened about 8 years ago when I was 26. I used the cycle to and from where I was working. Before setting off home, I bundled up my jumper and clipped it onto the back of my bike, as I often did, and set off and reached a small junction that I was very familiar with. To the left was a flat path and led towards a pedestrianized area and a shop. To the right was steep and hilly and part of a busy bus route. I often chose to go right because I used to love racing down the hill and felt very in control and safe on my bike. What's more, I saw a colleague in that direction and wanted to say hi, bye as I went past, so I turned to go right. The next thing I knew, everything went very bright and I was dazzled and felt a jolt as I was thrown off my bike. As I sat up, barely injured, I realized that I was on the left of the junction on the pedestrian path. Someone asked if I was okay and I said I was fine and thanked them. After inspection, I realized that the sleeve of my jumper had fallen loose from its clip and had gotten caught in the bike chain which had thrown me off my bike. Yet, I was sure I had turned right. And if I had turned right, then my sleeve falling loose and falling off my bike would have been catastrophic, as I would have been hurtling down a hill with buses and cars. Another interesting thing is that since that event, my life changed significantly, mostly for the better. Things were not great for me at the time for various reasons, yet since then, it feels like I shifted and got another chance at life. I get chills thinking about it and sometimes can't stop myself from thinking about it. I want to share this because doing so might help make some sense of this extremely fortunate but bizarre experience. Case file number 675, written by TG. Yeah, it's definitely Lambik. This happened about 15 years ago, but we still talk about it and wonder what happened. It was New Year's Eve and we were with a group of friends. Some suggested playing Party & Co. For those who do not know the game, it's a board game where you play in teams and draw cards. With one category you have to draw, sing, create, etc. what's on the card, if I remember correctly. I'd never played the game before, and after that, and really did not know what the rules and the goal of the game was. Our friend said, "Just start, you'll figure it out while playing." So partners could not be in the same team. I was in the team that waited on their turn. It was my girlfriend's, now wife's, turn. She drew a card. She also had no idea what the game was. Looked at it, and without realizing, I said from across the room, "She's wondering how to portray Lambik," a famous but very random and old Belgian comic character. My wife looked at me annoyed, sighed and put the card back. She drew a new card, and it was only then someone asked what was up. She said, "Well, he revealed what was on the card." Our friend said that's not possible, that he's across the room. They took the card and the assignment was exactly as I said. We all freaked out, and it still puzzles me how I knew exactly the text on the card without even knowing if it was even one of the assignments. And besides that, out of every person, object, or anything I chose, why was it Lambik? It was, like I said, very random and has no role or meaning in any of our lives. What made my brain say that name? Creepy file number 29, written by Cultural Note 6722. Something is off with this driver. It's 5 a.m. as I'm writing this, and it feels like a good time to get this one off my chest. A while back, I went on vacation to California. I was taking 2 to 3 Ubers per day, and usually made friendly small talk with the drivers. "Isn't California weather great? I can't believe the prices here," and so on. One driver picked me up, and by chance I'd asked him to take me to the In-N-Out a couple blocks from my hotel instead of the hotel itself. I was traveling alone. He asked me what I was doing in California. I told him I was on vacation. He asked me who I came with. This made me instantly feel on edge, like I should say, my boyfriend. It felt like he was trying to gauge if I was traveling alone. I said, family. He asked me where I was staying. I pretended I didn't hear him. He asked again and I said, a hotel. He asked if it was near where he was dropping me. I said, kinda. He asked how long I would be in town. Oh, you know, vacation length, not too long. I had no problems telling my drivers I was from out of town, but I hated the questions he was asking. They felt off. He wanted too much detail for small talk. He then started to text while driving. I was looking over his shoulder. The text was not in English. I couldn't tell what language it was, but I could see my pickup location typed out. After he dropped me off, I watched his car. He pulled around to the back of the parking lot and sat there. He didn't leave the car. I stayed at the In-N-Out for almost an hour. I considered calling another Uber and asked some random woman if they had a car and could drive me. Eventually, I walked a couple of blocks to my hotel. I pretended to talk on the phone the entire time. Maybe I was overreacting. The reason I walked back was because I convinced myself I was being judgmental and maybe he was just being friendly. But I had plenty of drivers on that trip with no interest in sticking around an hour after dropping me off or texting about my location. I wanted to thank everyone for the support. I felt off about this since it happened because I'm constantly trying to address my own implicit biases and have been concerned that maybe I was misjudging the situation. It's good to hear, in an odd way, that it was in fact very sketchy. Case file number 676, written by Dorothy Gaming. The same distinctive blonde girl. Alright, this is really weird. Last Sunday, me and my parents were visiting my sisters in Copenhagen. We were going to the zoo before eating pizza at my sister's place afterwards. We parked our car near my sister's apartment because it's easier taking the bus. Parking spots near the zoo is almost non-existent. We get on the bus and sit down in the middle of the bus. In most newer buses in Denmark, there are 4 screens in 2 pairs, one in the front and one at around the middle. One of the screens from each pair shows what stop is next, while the other screen plays different ads and news, but without any sound. They were playing some small info about how to buy a bus ticket over the phone. I wasn't paying attention until something caught my eye. I'm really not sure what, but this blonde girl with dreadlocks and 20s, wearing a white t-shirt, appeared on the screen, just as the doors to the bus slid open, and sure enough, the very same girl stepped on the bus. Now I kinda just brushed it off. It's not uncommon for those ads to include normal people like you and me. It was probably just a coincidence that she was taking that very bus. 3 stops later, me and my family get off and go to buy zoo tickets. Behind the glass, handing us the tickets, you guessed it, the same blonde girl with dreadlocks in her early 20s wearing a military green t-shirt with the zoo logo. Now that was weird. But here's the kicker. It happened 2 more times within the next few minutes as we made our way towards the pandas, always wearing different clothes, but the same girl, the same hair and nose. Her eyes were so distinct, her expression constantly firm, freckles on her cheeks and nose. When I pointed her out to my sister, they agreed she did look familiar, but couldn't get a good look at her before she disappeared into the crowd and wasn't seen again, ever. Case notes, file number 676. So this speaks to a pattern for today's stories that revolve a lot around programming, NPCs. It is interesting, it raises many questions. The first one, how many people are real, possess souls, so to speak, the thing that makes us animated and capable of real choice, not just programming. We're all influenced by many things, our own programming, but yet we do make our own rational free will choices. Well, not always rational, but at least we are the ones deciding. There's always a pilot at the helm. We're not being driven along. For this specific case of seeing many times the same woman, the same freckles on her nose and cheeks, the same details in every respect, well, it could just be the universe running out of facial designs. I actually think this is fascinating, and it kind of blends in with my own thumbnail design, where I use an AI-generated program. Well, it's a website, but it runs a program to generate different facial features. It's called Chaos. You can play with other details like the height of the nose or the style, the colors, hues, and everything. I have a lot of fun with it. But it takes time to generate these images, and moreover, this is all from crossbreeding, as they label it, or you take one base image of a real person and then it alters it. But if you asked a program or a computer to generate an image from scratch just with words of text, that would take much longer. In fact, I don't even know if we can do that. Now in the real world, the so-called real world, maybe there was some sort of data corruption, and it wound up being that for that exact moment, there was no choice. It just took from the pool of faces you already saw because they were available, they were still in RAM, I suppose, the quickly accessible memory, and repurposed that. I think the first time you saw this girl from the ad, it was just a coincidence. It really was a real person. But then after that at the zoo, every time after that, it was effectively an emergency situation for the universe. And it corrected itself in this way. And it makes sense. It doesn't really matter if you think it's a glitch or not. You can't prove it's the universe, right? If there's a developer in the real world, he's not going to lose his job over this. I think he's fine. Just because you question things a little bit, it's not enough to really change perspectives. It's only when we compile these glitches in sufficient quantity that you start to see, yeah, this isn't quite right. Maybe we all need to follow the white rabbit. Or the blonde girl. Case file number 677, written by Fairy Ho. Sometimes these names get me. The supposed Duckling Massacre. This happened a few months ago. My dad and I were driving back home on a country road we are familiar with. It was sunset, but the road was still very visible. My dad freaked out because he saw a family of ducks crossing the road, a mother and some ducklings. The road twists a lot, and there was a car coming on the opposite lane, so with such short notice, he was forced to hit them. The moment we did, we both felt something big hit the bottom of the car, and then saw feathers trailing us. We were both freaking out and decided to go back to see if any ducklings survived. We knew the exact point where we hit them, except when we got there, nothing remained. By that, the ducks literally disappeared. We were both lost and walked up and down the road because we thought maybe we went to the wrong spot, but after a while of looking, we concluded there were no ducks anywhere. At one point, I found a dead duckling near the spot we hid the ducks. However, it was far away from the road and my dad and I were absolutely certain it hadn't been hit by a car. Also, it was not near old enough to produce the feathers we saw. We went back to the car and even drove back up and down the road to see if we missed them, but there was nothing. We left confused as hell, and to this day it still trips me out. Bonus file, written by Extreme Inflation 607, The Rainbow Park. My dad passed away in 2003. My niece was born in 2017. One day I was picking her up from school. They were doing construction on the road we usually take home, so I had to take a back way which took us by the cemetery. We drive by it and she goes, "That's where my grandpa Johnny is." That's right. I remember him. You do? Yeah, before I was born, he took me to the Rainbow Park. The only park she's ever gone to is the one by my sister's house that she calls the Blue Park, because, well, everything is blue. There are no parks around me that I know of that I would consider rainbow. The Rainbow Park? What's the Rainbow Park? The one in the clouds. He was really nice and tall and fluffy. Wow, that was nice of him. Did you have fun? Yeah, he lives in the clouds and he said he'll always watch over me. And Mom and Grandma Michelle and you, Aunt Elle. He loves me. I love him. My sister and my mom had no idea what she was talking about. They also agreed that they knew of no Rainbow Park. My sister is also not religious, so there was never any talk of my dad being in the clouds or anything like that. I definitely believe, especially kids, are more tuned to this kind of thing, that younger kids are so pure and unjaded that they are completely open-minded, leaving them better able to see the in-between, for a lack of better words. My niece isn't the type to have crazy stories. She has an imagination, of course, but she won't make the whole story up. The thing that sold it for me was when she said he was tall. She has never seen pictures or videos of my dad standing. We all have the same pictures up, and they are of his face and one of him sitting, but you can only see the chest up, and it's not something we talk about. He was 6'5", so he was indeed tall, but when we talk about him, we share funny stories and stuff. Never have we said remember how tall he was, if you get what I mean. When I told my mom this, she asked my niece if she went to that park with Grandpa Johnny. Yeah, Grandma, we played a lot. It was so fun. I was supposed to stay and play longer, but he said you were all so excited to see me and couldn't wait, so I went down the slide early. Why do I get to see my Grandpa Randy a lot and not Grandpa Johnny? My mom asked her what she meant. She said, I see Grandpa Randy every time I go to my dad's. I only see Grandpa Johnny sometimes. My mom asked her when she sees him, and she said, sometimes when I dream, I go to see him in the clouds and we just talk. But it's not a lot. I don't get to go there very often. My niece was born 2 months early by emergency C-section because she was in distress. Case file number 678, written by Living Good 99. The Doggy Coincidence. I've been on a bit of a binge of these stories, and it made me wonder if I had experienced anything like this myself, and I thought back and realized I have, although not as freaky or crazy as most people. I'm quite a skeptical person, but this always has me at a loss. My girlfriend's family lives a little ways away, and so often I'll drive over to visit with them. Without fail, and I mean every time, when we leave back home, and for some reason, only when we leave the town to head back home, this man is out walking his dog at the exact same position. Now sure, it could of course just be his routine, and I'm not just having a timing coincidence, right? Nah, we're talking it could be 3 p.m. or it could be 11 p.m. and he's still always cutting the corner exactly when we pass, as if he's spawning in. It's so odd. It's like seeing it replayed over and over and always so consistent. We always mention it on the way back and check, and without fail, he's there. I play a lot of games, and I swear to you, if this was happening in a game, I'd be complaining about the lack of NPC variety and programming. One of these days, I'm going to just be brave and pull over and just politely ask how frequently he walks his dog. Who knows, maybe he's thinking, damn, every time I walk my dog, that white car passes by.